Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
It was a month before her husband's birthday. Maria realized that her mother-in-law was planning a big celebration, but she didn't want to be a part of it. Robert, Maria's husband, was the owner and director of the local mill. In one person in a small provincial town, it all already looked like big business. The mill was in demand by the local people. Many people tried to keep livestock and poultry, which were then taken away from them by suppliers. Maria had been living with her husband for 10 years, but in recent years she had increasingly begun to question her choice. Once a young girl from the village, she wanted to marry a city dweller in the hope of leaving her godforsaken village. But the years went by, and Maria began to realize that family life with Robert, she had not succeeded. And it was not that she and her husband still had no children, but the man was never distinguished by a special devotion. After a year, Maria realized her husband was having an affair. So what? Thought the 25-year-old then. He married me anyway, and he comes home to me. But years passed, and Maria realized that her attitude to family life was fundamentally flawed. Maybe that's why we don't have children, Maria sighed. If he loved and appreciated me, he would not have any women on the side. What kind of life is that? My husband almost every day comes home from work, and with packs of lipstick, or from him women's perfume smells. Maria, in the last 3 years, began to think about what would happen if she and her husband divorced. It was a question that kept her on her toes. Maybe I'd meet someone who would love me, she thought, and what I have can really be called a marriage. Everything in our family is defective, starting with a phrase like you, and ending with the desire to cook dinner for her husband. Maria closed her eyes before her. Fragments from her childhood flashed through her mind. Her father, who drank a few drinks at dinner every night. Maria's mother, who worked for the participants and came home from work with no energy. Her legs were beginning to fail. The woman saw 3 cows, in whose yard her mother used to give milk before work and pouring it into jars, which the neighbor took away and took to the city to sell. And that, of course, was not life, sighed the woman. And anyway, why did we need so much? She thought. After all, it was possible for mother and father to leave their participant and to deal with cattle and poultry at home. They all hoped that they would retire and be given a lot of money. In fact, it turned out that despite the long service, both the father and the mother were given the minimum wage. How many daughter ran with them to all kinds of instances? But they couldn't do anything. In the end, Greg, Maria's older brother, who stayed in the village, looked after the parents. For the first few years, Maria came often. But 3 years ago, she went out to work, so now she didn't have as much free time. I'd better go to work, Maria said to herself then. I'm fed up with my mother-in-law and her reproaches. Soon she will start counting every piece of bread I put in my mouth. Maria looked at her watch, but there were 20 minutes left till the end of the break. She got a job as a cashier at a public utility. The pay, of course, was small. But Maria felt independent from her husband. The only friend, and she had Lucy, with whom the girl met by chance. Maria then had just arrived in the city. She had no housing. She found an ad in the newspaper that a room was rented. The landlady was a very nice woman named Lucy. She was 15 years older than Maria. But after Maria's marriage, the women continued to be friends. Hi, Maria. The friend was happy. I haven't heard from you for a long time. How are you doing? Hi, Lucy. Maria replied cheerfully. It's nothing new. I'm just preparing myself for my next challenge. Robert's birthday is in a month, so his mother's having a birthday party. At least we'll have fun, Maria. You've got to take it easy. Lucy, to tell you the truth, I'm sick of him and his mom. You were swearing, Maria. I don't even know why I live with him. He doesn't love me. I don't love him either. He's got tons of women on the side. And I've been telling you for a long time to leave him, and don't even think about it. Seriously, answered Lucy. Men like him never settle down. You know, I do not understand why he needs me. Gardens in the voice at Maria. Already would have filed for divorce, and each of us would have long lived their own lives. How many times we argued with him about it, and he still does not. And a week later he comes again all in lipstick. What kind of life is that? You know, such men keep good wives as an excuse to clear their conscience, replied her friend. Here they say, look, she lives with me. After all, everyone knows that Maria is a good model wife, so I am good. So I do everything right. You see, you're like a protective shield for him. A good woman can't live with a bad man. That's why he needs you. I don't know. There's a lump in my throat. I'm so sick of all this. Why am I so weak? Free. As soon as I'm about to file for divorce, something inside me stops me. You just look at the results, Lucy said. What have you accomplished in 10 years? Nothing. As the great Einstein said, if you do the same thing for years and expect a different result, you're crazy. And he's right. Maria answered quickly, this is just kind of crazy. And I want it to stop. When Maria started renting a room from Lucy, Lucy was going through a very difficult time in her life. Lucy was recently divorced and had been just coming to terms for a few years. Lucy's first husband was a man of glory and arrogance. He devalued his wife for years and made her bow down to him. When Lucy found herself in a deep depression, it began to dawn on her who was the real reason for her unwillingness to live. Her husband so suppressed her will that Lucy even considered suicide. And only by making incredible efforts, Lucy was able to break free from the net of her first husband and free herself from the psychological rapist in her life. 2 years after Maria got married, Lucy met her soulmate. Kolya, too, turned out to be a man with a difficult fate. But in a few years together, they overcame their deepest wounds and began to live, as they say, soul to soul. The friends saw from the outside what was happening to Maria, but she also realized that Maria had to see it all for herself. Lucy, I really understand that it is necessary to give it all up, Maria finally said. After his anniversary, I'm going to file for divorce. I don't care if he wants it or not, but I won't cover his dirty ass anymore. Let everyone know what a womanizer he is. I'm done. After talking to her friend, Maria felt a strong inner impulse. She saw very clearly that she needed to end her relationship with Robert. So I need to do the math, Maria thought as she returned to the cash register after lunch. For 3 months, I'll try to raise money for the first time. I have enough, and then what God will give. The working day went on in a measured manner. This day there were few visitors, and the cashier was always in her dreams. Maria's eyes were always on some children. She heard their ringing voices, felt the warmth spilling over her whole body. She thought to herself she would like to hold Butuzov in her hands. God, why I don't have everything like people? But a visitor came and the cashier was distracted from her thoughts. The man paid the utility bill, thanked me, and left. Finally, the working day came to an end. It was 4:50. Maria slowly began to pack her things. The woman didn't have a car. Yeah, she never really wanted one. Her husband never came home that early. So Maria took public transportation all the time. So the half is about to be a 1. Maria looked at her watch. In about 50 minutes, I'll be home. She boarded a full bus. Many people were returning home after work. Maria stared out the window. As the bus drove along, hitting a pothole or a bump, the city hadn't allocated money for road work for a long time. Therefore, there had not been much outrage from the passengers for a long time. I still had some chicken breast and some vegetables left, reflected on the way Maria, probably all together and in the heat. And as a side dish, I'll make pasta. Maybe I'll buy something else for tea on the way, she thought, although Robert had brought a box of chocolates and a cake the other day. His mistress must have run away from him that night. Oh my God. He wasn't ashamed to bring it home. Let him eat it himself. I'll buy myself some chocolate chip cookies. Maria got off one stop early to go to the store. She was curious about what she should get. Take this brownie. The salesperson offered her one. It's delicious. It's got everything from buttercream to nuts to chocolate. All right, give me half a kilo. I'll try it. Maria agreed. And you can also have a large leaf green tea. Well, I'll make myself a festive dinner tonight. Maria was glad, going home. It was still unknown when today Robert would come after this incident with a ruined date. He was angry all night last night. He must have been dumped by another mistress. Maria changed her clothes and got busy preparing dinner. Despite the fact that Robert was making good money, it couldn't be said that he was shocking. At least for the house, they always bought everything cheapest. Maria felt that her husband did not save them for his mistresses. Even judging by the candy he brought, they weren't cheap, but for his wife, the most ordinary caramel would have been fine. Sometimes it got ridiculous. One weekend, Maria asked her husband to buy fruit. Robert went to the market. He was gone most of the day. He finally came back in the evening. "What's this?" Shocked. Took out a bag. "Robert, they're all ruined." But at half price, my husband was quick to respond. "You wanted to make housing out of them anyway. These will do just fine. Are you out of your mind?" Maria got angry. "Maybe I should cook out of slop now." "Robert, don't you have any money?" "Yes," he answered briefly, "but you have to live wisely. If you can save money, why not?" And that wasn't the only time. But even then, in Maria's heart, there was a dream to get rid of her husband forever. Over the years, Robert only got worse. Naturally, this contributed to this, and his mother, Lily, was a woman willful. She brought up her children herself and thought that now everyone should be obliged to her for that. And this applied not only to her children, but also to all the other people who surrounded her. Only her younger brother Eugene never played by her rules. In fact, Robert's mother deliberately withheld that her younger brother at one time helped her very well. In fact, he bought his sister a house, and he himself at that time had nothing behind his soul. One day, Eugene couldn't stand it and told his sister everything. After that, they did not speak for many years. Robert's mother considered him the first enemy of her son and daughter. She always turned Don against him. In general, you could say, "Has nothing to do with our family." She used to swear. "His mother gave birth late, when my father was 20 years old. Who was his father? Nobody knew. She disgraced our whole noble family with that bastard. She was just over 10 years apart from her brother." So when Lucy Lamb's husband died tragically, she was 28 and left with nothing and 2 children in her arms. Eugene took a job in construction that year. He worked for 3 years and gave almost all the money to his sister, which she collected and with which she eventually bought a house. But Robert's mother never talked about it. She had once mentioned that Eugene had a girl he loved at the construction site. She fell from the 7th floor and died. Maria finally prepared dinner and sat down with anticipation at the table. But to her surprise, she found that she had no particular appetite. So much time and effort spent on all this eating. "I don't want to," Maria sighed and put down the spoon. "But I will definitely drink tea," she said to herself, looking at the beautiful cake in the plate. Maria finished her dinner, putting everything away. She knew that it was unlikely that her husband would come home early. Maria took the phone and called her mother, Manya. "How are you?" Her daughter asked excitedly. "How are your legs? Are you feeling better after the medicine?" "You know, Maria, sometimes it's nothing, and sometimes it just can't walk," sighed the mother. "I don't want to keep cattle or poultry." "Mom, it's high time you gave it all up." Maria supported her. "That you do not have enough money to live? My grandfather and I don't need much," said Wendy. "We all want to help you with Greg." "Yes, my brother has enough livestock of his own." Maria said angrily, "He should start a farm." "Maria, but I feel for you." Through tears, said her mother, "For your sake, we are walking on the ground." "What's the matter? Are we small or what, Mom?" The daughter scolded her mother. "We've been living our own lives for a long time." "Yes, at least Greg has a family and children." "What about you?" That hurt Wendy's feelings. "Maria, how's that? No kids? Mom, but don't start." Maria got angry. "But if it doesn't work out, what can I do? I'm doing fine. Robert says he's fine too." "Maria, you can, and that's why you have no children, because he is always on mistresses and his mother was worried about him. That's the kind of dog he is." "You're right about that," said Maria. "Mom, I want to divorce him. I'll file for divorce in a couple of months. It's his anniversary in a month, so my mother-in-law is preparing a party for the city. By the way, are you and Greg coming?" "I'm sure we're not. I don't think my son is either. They're always busy at home. How can you leave a farm like that?" My grandfather and I can't pull it off on our own. Maria, give up this town and come home. After the divorce, where will you go? You don't have a place of your own. And here the whole house is empty. Mom, I don't want to live in the country. You know that, replied her daughter. Of course, I will certainly come to help you, but not to live here. Well, at least after the divorce for a while to come back to your senses, asked Wendy. You're still young. Hurry up and settle things with Robert. Maria, you'll get married and have children. And with them, you see nothing, only emptiness. After the conversation with her mother, Maria was even more confirmed in her decision to divorce Robert. She realized that when she first met him, she wanted an affluent life more than love. But as she grew older, her selfish desires melted away like smoke. And Maria saw clearly that living for a comfortable and settled life without any interest in each other made no sense. She remembered the day when she met her future husband. The girl was working in a store. One day, a handsome young man walked in. He examined Maria from head to toe. The saleswoman blushed. Do you want something? Finally, she said, I can show you. Unfortunately, what I need is not for sale here, sighed the man. And what is it? Puzzled, asked Maria and began to look around at the goods in the store. Love, romantically said the stranger. It is impossible to buy such a thing. You can, of course, find a girl who will have such a gift, but only where to find her. Looked the visitor directly into the eyes of the girl, turned around and left. What did he want? Perplexed, thought Maria. What did he want? He likes people like him to get on his nerves. The saleswoman quickly forgot about the strange customer. But to her surprise, a few days later he appeared in their store again. Unfortunately, while you were away, love, so did not bring with a serious look, she pronounced. The man at the top of his voice, he laughed loudly. With joyful eyes looked at Maria. The girl became embarrassed and blushed. Do I like you? Said the young man Robert. He extended his hand to the girl. Maria, shyly, shook that hand she shook. You need something else tonight. Yes. Through laughter, he answered. I need a beautiful vase for my mom. Could you pick something out for me? She broke hers the other day and now she's in pain. My mom loves flowers, especially when they are in big vases. Well, take this one. I offered Maria a big vase that was on the floor. It is not only beautiful, but also very spacious. You are probably right. I will take it. The man was pleased. I'll help you pack it. Why did Robert choose her? Maria had never known the man. He was prominent. He could easily have chosen a more suitable mate. But then the girl really believed he was in love with her. 2 months later, Robert had already introduced Maria to his mother. The latter looked at the girl with undisguised disdain. So your parents raise pigs. She looked reproachfully at Maria. Anna, what's indicative of that? No, the girl corrected her. We only have cows and chickens. We don't do pigs. And for me, there is no difference, grudgingly replied Lily. But why else could not understand the behavior of Robert's mother? Maria? They are completely different animals. She smiled. The woman looked at her with contempt. She wanted to say something, but her son intervened. Mom, Maria, and I want to get married this summer. He said, Can we get married in a cafe? Isn't it a little early for a wedding? Are you thinking about it? Mother replied dryly. You don't even know her. And judging by the fact that Maria has no education, it's hard to say what she will make of her in the future. And Robert has an education. Maria asked, surprised. As far as I know, he dropped out of the institute and didn't finish it. But at least he studied there for 3 years. Lily looked at her unhappily. It was enough for him to run his own mill. And your 11 grades are only enough to clean the house. After the first meeting with Robert's mother, Maria felt spat upon. The girl at first wanted to prove that she too was capable of something in life. But after a couple of months, rumors reached her. How did Robert get the mill? Was it true or not? But Maria was told that Lily had once been the mistress of the town administrator. For many years, he had paid her for her services, so to speak. Robert's mother derived a very good income from this liaison. First, she got her son into an institute. Then her daughter graduated from technical school and got married. For the wedding, Lily gave her an apartment in the city. And then, out of nowhere, Robert got a mill. "Robert, where did you get all that money?" People used to ask him. "You never worked anywhere for so many years on your mother's neck." "As if you didn't work," he answered. "I'm not going to go around telling you everything, so it's all earned with sweat and hard work." Once the mill was up and running, even though it was in great demand, Robert used that to his advantage and jacked up the prices right away. Robert had people telling him, "You can't do that. If there was something else in town, we go there. And you take advantage of the fact that you're the only one. And you raise your prices like hell." But the mill owner only smiled back. He wasn't going to lower the price for his services. And neither were the common laborers, who gambled on the mills. He didn't pay much for the sacks. It was about 10 o'clock when Maria heard a click in the lock. Her husband showed up on the doorstep. He was glowing with happiness. He smelled strongly of women's perfume. "Robert, have you no conscience at all?" The wife couldn't bear it. "You think I'm going to put up with your partying forever? I'm going to file for divorce." "Maria, well, what are you on again?" The husband protested. "Don't spoil my mood. You're not going anywhere from me." "We'll see about that," shouted Maria and went to her room. "Can you prepare the papers?" she shouted from there. "What a fool," Robert replied. "Do you think I'll give you anything after the divorce? You've gone to hell. I'm gonna divorce you myself, just as soon as I finish my business with Vanessa." Maria didn't sleep very well at night. She was always angry with her husband and herself. She realized that her patience was coming to an end, and she would not be able to live like this for a long time. In the morning, she woke up early. Her husband was still asleep. Maria quickly dressed and went outside. "I don't even want to talk to him anymore," she whispered, "so that my eyes don't see him." Maria wandered silently through the morning streets. There was a slight fog. September was just beginning, so the remnants of summer were still in the air. It was Friday, and for Maria, it was the last day of work. The weekend was ahead of her. "I'll go to my parents' house," she told herself, and talk to them. "Maybe I'll get some ideas about what to do after the divorce." Maria sat down tiredly on a bench, closed her eyes, and put her face in the morning sun. Some children appeared in front of her eyes again. They were laughing loudly, throwing a ball. "How funny they are," Maria sighed and came to her senses. "I guess I want kids so much inside that it's become my drive. Mom's right, I'm 35 now. Why should I waste my time with this Robert? And there's no love between us." Maria got up from the bench and wandered towards the bus stop. She realized that she would arrive at work too early, but decided it was better to be there than to stay at home. The day flew by very quickly, and Maria was getting home tired. She suddenly picked up the phone and called her husband. "Robert, I'm going home today. I'll be back on Sunday," she said dryly. Well, without hiding her joy, her husband answered. "When will you be back?" "Call. He's probably afraid that I'll catch him at home with his mistress." Maria thought to herself and hung up the phone. Robert was very happy that his wife had gone away for a few days and would not be home. His new acquaintance, Vanessa, was driving the man crazy. He'd fallen in love like a boy before his 40th birthday, so I'm going to call Vanessa now so she'll be waiting for me. He picked up the phone and dialed a familiar number. "Hello, my favorite," heard a flirtatious voice in the receiver. "Of course I'm waiting for you. I'm just about to cook us a romantic dinner." Vanessa was 22, and she tried with all her might to get a money man. She had come to the city with a very specific purpose, and she did not want to waste her time. Vanessa immediately set herself a target. She had several wealthy men in mind. The girl was not daunted. The fact that they were married. The main thing to catch them in their nets. And then, if she succeeded, she could divorce one of them and marry him. That's good. And if not, I'm not the least bit embarrassed about being a wealthy mistress. Robert was the first to fall for Vanessa. Everything was going well between them, so the girl decided to stop with him for the time being. "The main thing that he constantly gave me money," thought Vanessa, sets the table. "Today about his wife, I will forgive the children, as he told me. They have no children. So there will be no problems in the divorce." Finally, the bell rang, and the hostess opened the door. She flung herself at the man's neck. "Robert, I missed you so much through tears," said the girl. "You know I probably can't go on without you." I can't even get through a day without you. What are you, my love? Robert kissed her. I love you very much too. How are we going to live from now on? She looked at him with innocent eyes. You're married, aren't you? You have a family. But I am married, yes, answered the man. But unfortunately, I don't have a family. Maria, and I didn't work out. And what are you going to do now? The girl asked with interest. After so many years of life, you will file for divorce? Exactly. Robert hugged his new girlfriend. I do not see any obstacles to our divorce. We have no children, we have nothing to share. Maria will leave my house with nothing. And if she sues, Vanessa thought, she could win it and take something away from you. Well, that's unlikely. Her lover reassured her. Maria's only been working for the last 3 years, and before that she lived entirely off me. So any division of property is out of the question. The family was and is fed only by me. She spends her pennies on pocket change. Well, that's good. The girl exhaled. I love you so much that I don't even know how I can live up to your divorce. She burst into tears. Vanessa, but everything will be all right. Robert hugged her. You'll just have to wait a couple months. Vanessa and her lover spent an unforgettable evening. The man for the weekend decided to stay at her place, but on Saturday he still had to go to work. Robert here was told that by the man from the mill on the phone. They won't pay for the flour here. They say there's another mill in town, and they're charging a lot less. They want you to give it to them at the same price. What's this nonsense? The owner was cursing. Who could open a mill there? He was surprised. All right, I'll be there soon. Robert, dissatisfied, drove to work. There were already several people gathered outside the mill. None of the customers wanted to pay the price he had set anymore. What kind of lawlessness are you doing here? The mill owner shouted unhappily. Either pay what I said, or get the hell out of here. I won't give you the goods. On what grounds? The man with the mustache answered him. I brought you my wheat, what are you doing here? You're the one who's pushing the sacks around here. You'll never lift a finger. With all your men working for nothing. You want to keep my flour for a fair price. Let that sin be on you, but remember, no one will ever come to you again. At the new mill, the prices are almost half what you're paying. And the owner is a good man. The man turned around and left. The others argued some more and left too. Robert Evil looked at his men and scattered the sacks in anger. Finally, he calmed down a little and approached one worker. Where is this bloody mill located? He asked. What kind of asshole gets in my way? I'll show him. Yeah, I don't know, the young guy shrugged. They say somewhere on Novorossiyskaya, but I'll deal with them now. Quickly, the owner jumped into his car. I'll show them who's boss. It took Robert an hour to find the new mill. He jumped out of the car and sped through the gate. What are you doing here? Shocked, asked the man. Do you work here? Imagine that, someone answered him. Why are you here? I don't need your orders. So you're the one who started the new mill. Robert shouted in anger. You bastard. Why is that? A man in his 50s answered him. I don't call you a bastard for living in a house bought at my expense for most of your life. How dare you? The guest raised his hand at him. I'll take you right here by the soul. But come on, try it. The owner of the new mill grabbed his hand, so hard that he cried out in pain. Let go, you idiot. You'll break my arm. Robert tried to get away. I hate you so much. You're just the same as you were. You're just the same as you are now. Why did your grandmother give birth to you? It's not up to you to decide who lives and who doesn't, his uncle said. So go on, get out of here. I'm not meddling in your business. You're a bastard who's trying to price me out. The nephew was angry. If you don't calm down, you'll see what I'll do to you. I'm the boss here. That's why I set the price I want. Eugen answered. And the fact that you have no conscience and you steal from people, it's got nothing to do with me. I'm your bastard, Robert hissed. And your mill to hell's bedroom you'll see, and I'll get nothing for it. The man started his car and drove at full speed to his mother's house. She was cooking in the kitchen and wasn't expecting her son. Robert's son, what's wrong? Concerned. His mother asked him, You don't have a face on you. Did your wife drive you crazy? What's my wife got to do with it? He said in anger. It's your brother. God, why isn't he dead yet? Eugen said in amazement to her mother. What does he have to do with it? What has he done to you? He opened his own mill and set low prices there. That's why no one wants to come to me with anger now, replied the son. What a bastard, underhanded broad, Lily said. Well, I'll show him. You'll show him what? Robert said with annoyance in his voice. After the death of your administrator, we have no such connections in the city. Let's hire some guys to show him. The woman's eyes lit up with rage. In fact, let them kill him. How much do I hate him? It won't work. Strictly looked at her son. Suspicion will fall on us, and I'm not going to jail for that idiot. Then what are we going to do? Lily was worried. He's not going to close his mill now, is he? That's why we're going to start a fire, Robert smiled. It's an old building, so it could easily happen there. You want to burn down his mill? The mother looked at her son in astonishment. Robert, I won't let you do such a thing. But I won't do anything myself, he said, rubbing his hands together. I have a man in mind. He will organize it all. It is necessary to do everything carefully so that we are not suspected. Well, all right, agreed the mother. Just be very careful, or it's true. We'll go to jail for such an idiot. He's not worth it. Robert Lucky went back to his mistress. Images kept flashing in his mind of the new mill going up in flames. The man parked his car and ran into the entryway. Vanessa was already waiting for him. Robert, darling, what happened to your care? She asked the man. You left so abruptly that I didn't even know what to think about. Yes, I had some urgent business to attend to, Robert replied. But now I am completely free for you. He kissed the girl. That kind of thing. Vanessa didn't stop. Something serious. Can you get hurt? Not anymore, he smiled. Some bastard crossed my path, so I put him in his place. Sweetheart, were you threatened? I wanted to get the information I needed. Vanessa, they're bandits. No, Robert laughed. It's just that there's a new mill in town, and he's charging a very low price for the service. That's why all my customers went to him. But it's all right now, don't worry. One of these days, that new mill's just gonna burn down. You lost all your customers. Vanessa interrogated him with annoyance. What's to be done now? You have no income. Yes, I will solve this issue one of these days. Robert calmed his beloved. So don't worry. The girl really didn't like what had happened. She realized that Robert was not as reliable a lover as she would have liked. He could lose everything in an instant. Okay, I'll wait, Vanessa said to herself. If things don't work out with him, I'll dump him right away. Why do I need him without money? I don't need a guy like that. You meet a lot of them on the street. Robert stayed with Vanessa all night. The man decided that when his wife called him, he'd go home. So he decided to forget about all his troubles and indulge in bodily pleasure with his beloved. Vanessa, how I love you, he whispered to his mistress. I will dawn soon, and we will definitely be together. The girl looked into his eyes, but in her mind she had other plans unfolding. Robert, I got on the bus. His wife called him. I'll be home in 2.5 hours. Maria really didn't want to go home. It wasn't that she dreamed of staying in the village, but her dislike for her husband was growing so strong by the day that she didn't even want to see him. Maria, if it has come to the point of disgust, then you should give it all up already, the father told his daughter. It won't do any good. You know how many times your mother and I didn't fight, how many times we were angry with each other. But it was anger. There was never any hatred between us. That's true, Wendy confirmed. I always divorced your father in language, and then when we calmed down, I realized I didn't want to live without him. I never wanted anyone else. I realized that I have driven myself into my own trap, sighed my daughter. I wanted an easy life, but as it turned out, everything has to pay for it. An easy life is just an illusion. It never is. It just seems that if you have a wealthy husband, there will be no problems in your life. But I've been paying for my Robert's security all these years. I put up with all his mistresses, his greed, which has started to show, especially in the last few years. I've spent so many years trying to ignore his mother's insults. What's the point of all this? I'm not swimming in butter. I basically have nothing behind me. All my suffering isn't worth it. So when you get here, File for divorce right away. There's no point in dragging it out, summed up my father. You won't be on the street, and you won't be without a piece of bread. If you want, you can come and live with us. Know your mother, and I will help you as much as we can. Maria was on her way home, and she had a very strong desire to break up with Robert that very day. She did not want to wait any longer, neither until his anniversary nor after. I will come and tell him at once, Maria thought, whether he wants to or not. I don't care if it goes on any longer. It can't. Maria opened the door to Robert's apartment. The house was still empty. She sat down tiredly on the bed and began to estimate how many things she had to take with her. Furniture was out of the question, although she had bought the kitchen set entirely at her own expense. Let it stay with his new wife, she smiled. If only he would leave me alone. 2 hours later, Robert arrived. His wife called him into the kitchen. Husband puzzled. Robert looked at her. I think you realize that our family no longer makes sense. Maria said calmly. So it's better for us to divorce by mutual consent. Ted seriously delayed his husband to think over how he should act now. Robert, of course, was going to divorce his wife, but he planned to make sure that it was his initiative. The man was very afraid that Maria might vilify him, and his ego did not allow this in any way. I don't think such things can be solved so easily, he objected. They are resolved coldly, said the wife, especially when the husband has had mistresses throughout his married life. I have something to present to the court. Maria, yes, they were just romantic encounters. Robert protested. Did they prevent us from living together? I don't care what you call your mistresses. His wife answered him angrily. But I won't stand for it any longer. Tomorrow, I'll take the application to court. I have no claim to any of your property. About this, you cannot even worry, but she wants to divorce you before the anniversary. My mother was yelling into the phone. How dare she humiliate us like that? Ungrateful bastards. Robert, until your anniversary is over, a divorce is out of the question. Please ask her to wait. And at your birthday party, I'll give her a party. So she won't even want to stay in town for the embarrassment. Leave it to me. Robert realized that his mother had planned the grand celebration to promote him out of himself, so to speak. And now she could have everything fallen apart. The man approached his wife again. Maria, I beg you to hold off on the divorce until it has passed. My anniversary, the husband said dryly. You know what an embarrassment that would be for us, don't you? No, replied the wife briefly. Let me get what you deserve. Both you and your mother have lived at other people's expense all your lives. I will not wait. I'll take the papers. Tomorrow, Robert was desperate. First, he got in trouble because his uncle had started a new mill. Now he realized his wife was leaving. The man called his mother again. All right, I'll talk to her myself. The mother finally made up her mind. I'll talk her into it. You can be sure. A few minutes later, Maria's phone rang. She saw her mother-in-law's number. At first, Maria didn't want to pick up the phone, but she had so much anger against her that she wanted to say something to her. Maria heard her. You and Robert have the right to decide what you want to do. But I'm asking you to hold off on the divorce until after the anniversary. I've never asked you for anything. Just do my first and last request. And it was true. Lily was not the kind of person to ask, especially not from Maria. She was astonished and agreed to her mother-in-law's request. Thank you. Only just answered Robert's mother, and hanging up the phone, reveled in their victory for a long time. Well, I'll show you on anniversaries. You'll see at my place. What does it mean to deal with me? The next day, Maria was in no mood to go to work. She was so anxious to get it all over with. And now she had to wait almost 3 more weeks, Maria. But she didn't blame herself for that. Her friend told her, when she called her at lunchtime, that you would fulfill her request and let the rest be on their conscience. Lucy, I don't want to see him like that anymore. Through tears answered Maria. Now I do not understand how I could live with him. Every day he's wearing lipstick, and it's like being sprayed with that stinking perfume. Well, you don't care now. Lucy objected. What do you care now who he's giving his romantic dates to? She laughed. You're just mad at yourself and feel guilty about everything. You feel like it could have been avoided, but it really couldn't. If you hadn't been through all that, you wouldn't be seeing all this now. So it was a lesson you had to learn. Oh, Lucy, I wish I could look at life the same way, she sighed. I can't breathe because the pain inside is so tearing. I can't breathe. It's okay. All this will pass and much faster than you think. Maria encouraged the woman. After talking to Lucy, the friend felt lighter. In general, Lucy was often for her both a psychologist and a psychotherapist. On this day, the working day ended very quickly, and all because Maria really did not want to go home. She delayed leaving until the last minute, but it was already 6:30, and there was nothing more to do at work. I'll go to the park, Maria decided. It's still light outside. Maybe a walk would calm me down a little. I don't want to go home if only someone knew. But Maria's worries, on the one hand, were not justified. Robert was now spending all his nights with his mistress. His wife never saw him at home. Sometimes he called her if he had any questions. And Maria finally began to fall asleep at night, not afraid to hear her husband come home. Robert, on the other hand, was going through a period of problems, and the man was trying to get out of it all. He finally found a man who could do the arson for him. For almost a week, his mill had been out of business, with no one coming to crush grain for him. Robert was also hurt by the fact that Maria was the first to decide to leave him. It had left him with no peace. Even though he was with Vanessa now, he felt vulnerable all the time. No Maria had ever left him before, and that was with his mistresses. And here it was his wife who had taken the initiative. Earlier, when they had talked about divorce, Robert had realized that it was all nonsense. He was very easily manipulated by Maria, but now it was serious. She wants to leave me, sounded the arrogant voice in his head. Who the hell is she? Some Maria from some godforsaken village. You should thank me for the rest of your life for marrying you. You idiot. I'll take everything away from you. But then Robert remembered that Maria had no claim to any of his property, and that made him feel even more hurt. What's the matter with you? Vanessa hugged him. You're always so angry. You still haven't managed to solve the problem with the new mill. What's Robert come to? No, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm just trying to work things out with my wife. What's the problem? She doesn't want to file for divorce. The girl asked curiously. Naturally, such a tidbit to lose. Arrogantly laughed the man. Yes, she is at my feet, asking me not to leave her. Why are you so wary? Vanessa, you're not divorcing her. She's holding her breath. Who needs her? Robert looked at her. I'm sick of that country bumpkin. You have no idea how tired I am of her. I even blocked her number. She's always calling me and crying, so I'll just stay with her. She comes to my work all the time. I got Robert crawling on his knees in front of me, but something has to be done about it. The mistress gave him a stern look, or she'll give us a hard time. She'll be sleeping under our doors. Don't worry, I'll put it all away soon. The man kissed her. Everyone should know their place. You're my queen. What is she? A pig farmer. She's lived among pigs all her life. No beauty in her, no nurture. Robert, I can't understand why you married her at all. Vanessa asked in amazement. Do you think I wanted to? The man laughed. Yes, she got me drunk and seduced me. And then she chased me for 2 months, blackmailed me that she was pregnant by me. Her father filed a police report for allegedly raping her. Do you know how much trouble they've caused me? Why do you think we don't have kids? Because I've never slept with her. I don't need her. All right, let's say you did. You married her, the girl reasoned. But why did she have to put up with it for 10 years? After a couple months, it was clear she wasn't pregnant. So he could have divorced her right away. But Vanessa, that Maria has made my life a living hell. Robert said pitifully. Do you know how many times Maria cut my veins? She blackmailed me. If I could have done it before, I would have divorced her a long time ago. But now it's gonna be okay. She kissed a man. Girl, trust me. You'll be happiest with me. Soon you'll divorce her, and we'll have a new life. Vanessa, I don't need anyone else but you. Robert hugged her. You're all I've got, and this Maria, she can go to hell. I don't even want to think about her. No one can keep us apart. Vanessa was very pleased with herself. It seemed to her that Robert was on the hook. She didn't even think that it would be so easy for her. The girl felt that the man was willing to do anything for her. Vanessa heavy herself with dreams that soon she would move out of the rented apartment to Robert, persuade him to sign his apartment over to her, and then her game would be over. The man wasn't as rich as she would have liked. Therefore, the girl was not going to spend her whole life on him. Maria waited for her husband's anniversary as a kind of verdict. She had a strong feeling that something would happen on it. She was cautiously waiting for the birthday, her spouse at work. Everything went on as usual. One day was followed by another. It was Thursday when Maria was on her way home from work. She took it slowly, not paying attention to the fact that it had started raining fall rain outside. Maria stopped outside her house. God, it's like a prison to me now. She looked at her driveway. One thing I'm glad Robert's not coming over tonight. But it still stopped saving me. How I wish I could call a cab, load up my stuff, and go wherever the hell I wanted to go. Maria walked into the entryway and reluctantly went up to the third floor. She opened the door to her apartment and hesitated. Maria was about to enter when suddenly she heard quick, heavy footsteps downstairs, and a strange man appeared in front of her. Robert lives here. He asked unhappily. I need him urgently. Go get him. Hello. Surprised was all the landlady could say. I'm probably going to upset you, but I don't think he'll be home right now. Who are you? The stranger looked at her angrily. Are you his wife or? Neither. Maria answered indifferently. We're going through a divorce, so I can't tell you anything about his whereabouts. He's probably with his next mistress. I'm sorry. The man has come to his senses. I can talk to you. This is a very serious matter. I've been surprised by Maria. If you want to ask me about Robert, I can't help you. I really don't know where he might be, she answered tiredly. Still, let me ask you a few questions. The stranger insisted. I am, unfortunately, Robert's uncle, and he is not at all embarrassed by our relationship. Are you, Eugene, in shock? Interrogated the landlady. Well, come in, but I really don't know how to help you. I believe your name is Maria, asked the woman. The man, when he came in. I wasn't at your wedding. In fact, I wasn't invited. I'll be honest with you. I have so much conflicting information about you that I don't even know what to believe, she sighed. Lily never had a good word to say about you. How long have I known her? She hated you all the time, but I don't quite understand why. Because she doesn't have a single reason, sighed the guest, and sat down in the chair offered to Maria. She's been arrogant all her life. I don't know how she got married with such a temper. Alex was under her heel for almost 8 years, and then one day he was found dead near the house. To this day, no one knows what happened to him. According to the doctor's conclusion, his heart had stopped Lily. All the juices had drained out of him. She did not let him die. He went to work and had some time off from her. She didn't work anywhere. In fact, you could say her sister married herself off to him. The guy didn't want to marry her. Wow. Maria looked at Eugene in amazement. You can't tell from her. She tells everyone what a difficult life she had, how she raised 2 children by herself. When Alexa's husband died, I felt sorry for Robert, I sighed. I was only 18 years old at the time, so I immediately got a job on a construction site instead of Alex. I gave almost all the money I earned to my sister. It was later I found out that in those years she, it turns out, had a sponsor on the side. After her husband died, she quickly buried the director of the forestry, who also brought her money. That's why she hated me. I knew about all her lovers, and she couldn't do anything about it. My sister used the tactic, best defense, offense, and tried with all her might to smear me. Unfortunately, she also turned her children against me, although they'd both look like her so selfish and inhumane grew up. So the fact that I have no relatives, I have not lost anything. And your mother? Careful. Maria, Eugene asked. Was she still alive then? No. With annoyance in his voice, he answered. Mom died shortly before Elk's husband died. Mom was a very nice person. It's not clear who she gave birth to such a monster. Maria sank into her thoughts while her guest drank tea. She realized that everything she had thought about her husband and his mother had not appeared to her. It was all really so, and to expect her to be happy with him was ridiculous. Maria, I didn't want to talk to you to discuss my sister. Eugene finally spoke up. Robert is such an idiot that in his blindness he even went to the crime. Did he kill someone? Shocked, said Maria. I always thought he was a coward. That's because he's a real coward. He wanted to commit arson, answered the guest. Do you understand? I happen to be lucky enough to open a mill on the other side of town. I myself know how people live here, so I set very democratic prices for my work. You need an influx of customers to keep people paying. I first expected to lower the price to the lowest level to attract people, and then I planned to raise the prices by 10%. After all, I need to pay people a salary. No one will work for me for free. So even those increased prices, I was going to set almost twice as low as Robert's mill. He found out there was another mill in town, and he came to me to make his case. They can make idle threats with their tongues. It runs in the family. And tonight my watchman caught one of them. He was going to set fire to my mill. Of course, nobody else wants to do it but Robert and his mother. They don't have much imagination. That's why they decided to get the competition out of the way, so to speak. I haven't filed a police report yet. I wanted to talk to him first, and if he doesn't come to his senses, I won't feel sorry for them anymore. I honestly don't know where he is. After finishing the story, the guests answered the hostess. Robert hasn't slept at home for a week. After I told him that I would file for divorce, his mother asked me to wait until his anniversary. She's going to throw a huge banquet. She is the one who can only self-promote, laughed Eugene. I'd advise you to be careful with them. They are rotten-hearted people. They don't recognize anyone but themselves. Unfortunately, I realized it too late, Maria sighed. Almost 10 years wasted. But nothing is for nothing. The man supported her. You know, at first I was very angry with myself that 3 years as a slave worked for Leica. But then I saw that in this situation I'm right, not her. And whatever she says about me, God knows the truth is on my side. And she'll get what she deserves in due time. All right, I'm sorry to pry into your soul with my problems. You need to sort yourself out. I'll keep an eye on Robert at his mill. It's just that I'm working as a handyman myself. I can't hire many people yet, so I have to work like everyone else. The man thanked Maria for the tea and left the apartment. She looked after him for a long time. Yes, for so many years there were legends about what a scoundrel and a cheat Eugene was. But in fact it turned out to be the opposite. She thought. So it's true about Lily's receptionist's lover too. Having lovers runs in the family. It must have been a rule their mother had instilled in their family. Maria smiled at her thoughts. Maria closed the door and sat down tiredly on the sofa. She had the feeling that she had been deceived for many years. And today she had finally learned the truth. Everything had come to a head. The divorce was already a done deal for her. Nothing else could turn Maria back. She would never have a normal life with Robert. To the woman's surprise, her husband came home that evening. He was looking for some documents. Maria didn't really want to get involved in his affairs, but something prompted her to start talking to him. Your uncle came today. She looked at her husband. He wanted to talk to you. What did he want? Robert asked dismissively. The bastard still came to my house. He caught some man in the night who wanted to set his mill on fire. Coldly pronounced his wife. So he, before he wrote a police report, wanted to talk to you. Robert turned pale. He had been told that everything that needed to be done last night had already been put under the mill, and that all that was left was to throw a match in the right place. How did you catch the shock? Asked the man. He had already been to the police. Terrified, he whispered. I don't think so, replied indifferently. He's got a wife. That's why he was looking for you, to talk to you. Robert stared at his wife. His eyes were running from side to side and sweat was beading on his face. He said nothing more to Maria and ran out of the apartment. What an idiot. The man swore as he got into the car. I'll show you now. He wants to write a police report on me. Robert drove the car toward his uncle's house. It was almost 10 o'clock. When he knocked on his front yard, You bastard, why did you come to see my wife today? He shouted loudly. Did you want to rape her? Or have you two been having a love affair for a long time? Eugene expected everything from his psychotic nephew, but not this. The man looked at him in shock. I ask you, what is it with you and my little one? Why did you come to see her today? The neighbors told me everything. Robert's eyes burned with rage. You bastard, you slept with my wife. Answer me. Eugene realized that a normal conversation with his nephew could not take place. Tomorrow I will file a police report on you. He answered briefly. I'm fed up with your madness. There will be an attempt to set fire to my mill and slander against me and your wife. Eugene went into the yard and closed the gate. Robert pounded on it for a long time, shouting something. Then he jumped into the car and drove home. He shouted from the doorstep, "It's fast, come here." Her husband ordered her. The wife was already asleep when she heard his inhuman scream. Shocked, she went out to him. Robert's hair was disheveled. There were convulsions running all over his body. "Maria, I found out everything," he finally said. "So that's the real reason for the divorce. You cheated on me with my own uncle. Robert, you're out of your mind." Maria stared at him in amazement. "Do you have any idea what you're talking about?" "I went to see him and he confessed everything to me, screaming like a madman her husband. How could you?" And he suddenly slapped her across the face. "What kind of bitch are you? Get out." Maria screamed at the top of her voice. "I'll call the police and an ambulance to take you to a mental institution. That's where you belong." Robert seemed to come to his senses a little. "He'd been staring at his wife since my birthday. I don't want you in my house," he said angrily. "I hate you so much. You slept with him for so many years. As soon as I threatened him, he confessed everything to me. What kind of a bitch are you?" Robert slammed the door and quickly ran downstairs. Maria stood there like a slob. She couldn't understand what had happened. Now, at last, she covered her face with her hands and cried. Could Eugene have said such a thing to him? Was her brain exploding? He seemed like an adequate man to me. God, what had I gotten myself into? Now this idiot will tell everyone that I cheated on him with his uncle. Maria spent the rest of the night in the kitchen drinking valerian. She couldn't come to her senses. Today, I'll go to the mill to Eugene and talk to him. She's made up her mind. Jesus, I don't know what's going on. Who's stupid and who's normal? The next day, Maria barely made it to work. She was pale and could barely stand on her feet. Maria, go home. The boss let her go. I can see that you are not feeling well. Maria wanted to go home first. Then she turned around and walked to the bus stop to get to the other side of town. It was about 10 o'clock when she finally found the new mill. Maria was feeling very tired. So when she entered the mill grounds, she almost fell down. Are you sick? Some man with a broom picked her up. Let me put you on a chair. Thank you. I'm all right, the guest said quietly. Could you please call Eugene your boss for me? Now wait, answered the guy, and throwing the broom, ran to some tall building. In about 20 minutes, Eugene appeared on the street in his work clothes and covered in shot dust. Maria, the man was surprised. What's wrong? You just don't have a face, Eugene. She began and, unable to stand it, burst into tears. You told Robert yesterday that we were having an affair. He came to me at night, accused me of cheating, said that you confessed everything to him. What kind of nonsense is that? The man was angry. When will all this shit out of my life? He couldn't take it anymore and swore. By God, they're all sick in the head. They're all in the new house. He came to see me late last night. Probably after you told him I had him. That asshole was screaming like crazy all over the street. First, that I wanted to rape you. Then that we've been lovers for years. I didn't say anything to him. All I said was I'd go and report him to the police today for attempted arson and slander. And that was it. God, he's really crazy. I could barely pronounce Maria. He threw all the blame on me. Now it turns out he's divorcing me because I cheated on him with you. Not because he's had women on the side for 10 years, but because he made up a story about what a mean bitch I turned out to be. I told you they were a family of moral assholes. The man sighed. You should stay away from them. Well, God be with them. Maria, I'm sorry, but I'm starting to worry about you. I realize that you are quite a normal, adequate person. It's a hell of a lot easier to break someone's psyche with this. Wait for me here. I'll be back soon, asked the mill owner. Maria couldn't help it. Tears kept running down her cheeks. She was in so much pain. She couldn't understand then how one could lie and break another person's fate so easily. Phew, out of breath, Eugene came running. Let's go. You need to come to your senses because you're going to be so depressed you will need months to get out of it. Besides, I know the case, and it will be easier for you to discuss it with me. Maria obediently followed Eugene. She realized that it would be very difficult for her to understand and accept it all. But let's order some hot tea and something sweet to lift our spirits. And then, if you're hungry, we'll ask for something more serious. A man sat a woman at a table in a cafe. Maria looked around indifferently. She was in such a deep depression that she wanted to cry all the time. They brought hot tea, and the woman seemed to start to come to her senses. Maria, there's really nothing new in all this. Eugene looked at her. These are psychological traps for the mind. They are already 1,000 years old. First of all, always attacking first. What's in it for Robert and his mother? But we stay in complete shock for a while. So we become easily manipulated. That is, we become somewhat weak-willed. Now the big question is, where does this inner pain come from? I mean, why are we so hurt by their lies? Because we're always focused on other people's opinions and not our own. It's not that Robert is a complete fool that hurts you. It's that others will believe his slander. But I never did that, Maria said through her tears. I have not given him a single reason to doubt me in 10 years. Exactly. You have built up certain ideas about yourself. Eugene supported her. And in your opinion, you are worthy? Maria is a good wife. But does Robert's lie change anything? No. For you, the truth remains the truth. But now there are other people at play. That's the problem. You need to prove to others that it's a lie. And the more important question is, do we have to prove anything to anyone if we know the truth? No, those who are ready will accept the truth. And those who are not ready will never be able to accept it. No matter what you do. Do you understand? I think so, don't you? Maria's eyes shone. Because whatever Robert says I didn't do, but for some reason I start to act like it's true. I feel ashamed of something I didn't do. I'm afraid that other people will think badly of me. That is the biggest problem with lying. Eugene looked at her. It's not your fault, but for some reason you feel guilty for something you never did. Do you know how much I suffered when my favorite girl died on a construction site? It's one thing for people who work with you to spread gossip, but it's another thing for people closest to you to make it up, and it seems like there's nothing you can do about it. After all, everyone knows that you communicate with them. You trust them and tell them what you do not tell outsiders. And there is an illusion that relatives know not only more, but know all the most mysterious details of your life. That's why you need to trust their information. When Helen crashed, she made up the most unbelievable stories. I struggled with this for years. At first, in her version, I wanted to rape Helen before the wedding. But she didn't want intimacy with me. Then she had another version, that Helen was cheating on me, and I dropped it myself. I just did it so carefully that no one could prove it. I was in so much pain at the time from losing someone I loved. But my sister took advantage of that and tried to break me psychologically. If I had drunk or killed myself then, she would have felt the happiest because it would have proved her superiority, her power. It's the same with Robert. He doesn't care about you at all. All he cares about is that he's always on top. He can never be wrong. That's what my friend Lucy tells me. Maria replied, I understand what you're saying. I just can't put it into the right words. You know, almost all my life I've been fighting with them, trying to prove something to them, the man continued. But all the time I made the same mistake. I thought that these people could ever understand me. Maria, now I can say with absolute certainty that it will never happen. It's simply impossible. They're incapable. They live in their own imaginary world and will never let anyone and anything get them out of there. They will fight everyone to the last, just as long as they don't admit they're wrong. And then what do? Maria reasoned. We have to get on with our lives. There is only one way out, answered Eugene. Let them live their lives. You know how hard it was for me at first not to react to all this nonsense. But I made a great effort. At that time, the movie language became the sharpest knife. It cut me mercilessly. But after a few years, it realized that it no longer had that effect on me. My sister then began to make up even more incredible things. And since it seemed crazy from the outside, a lot of people started to turn away from her. And so a very promising lover left her for her delusions. How mad was she at me then? Of course, she soon had the receptionist on her hook. But still, when I stopped responding to them altogether, my business took off. I had a good income. I was able to buy a mill, which is a very promising business for our town. I wasn't going to compete with Robert. I didn't even know anything about his prices at all. A few days after I opened my business, people started coming to me and telling me how Robert was overcharging and bullying his workers. It all happened by itself. Maria listened attentively to her interlocutor, and her mind became clearer and clearer. It seemed to her that she and Eugene were in some ways alike. Only the man had already been through a lot, and she had not. She only had to face all the perfidy of Robert and his mother. After the meeting with Eugene, Maria began to pack her things. She rented a small apartment near her work and moved in. But Maria didn't have enough experience yet to see all the games of her husband and Lily. "Maria, where are you?" Her husband asked excitedly when he discovered in the evening that neither his wife nor her things were in the apartment. "Robert, I'm filing for divorce tomorrow," she calmly replied. "After what you arranged yesterday, I don't need your anniversary or your mother." "Maria, but you promised." Her husband pressed her. "How can I do business with you if you don't keep your word?" "Robert, that's enough," Maria said dryly. "I will not play your games anymore. Do what you want." The man was very puzzled. First, he felt on top of the fact that he had come up with such a cunning plan with Maria. The cause of the divorce was now his wife, and he was left completely untarnished in the whole affair. But it all had to be shown in public on his birthday, and now Maria was out of his control. Robert picked up the phone and called his mother. Lily was absolutely thrilled with his plan. It couldn't have worked out any better. "Son," she rejoiced, "Maria was cheating on you with Eugene. It's such a great plan, and everyone's gonna know about it at the anniversary party." "Mom, but there's just one problem," replied the son, with annoyance in his voice. "Maria left me. She's going to file for divorce tomorrow. What should we do now?" The mother was silent for a while. She realized that she could not avoid talking to Maria. A few minutes later, she was on the phone. Maria's daughter-in-law did not answer her call. Then Lily started calling her every 5 minutes. Finally, Maria couldn't take it anymore. "Maria," Robert's mother sobbed at the top of her voice. "How could it be? I thought you and my boy would make up soon. I want you to live with him so much. Who needs him but you? In fact, Robert's been crying all day today because you left him." "I'm not going back to him," Maria said coldly, "so don't waste your time." "Maria, I really beg you, please don't leave us at the anniversary," stammering with tears, said Lily. "Please do what you want after Robert's birthday, but don't leave us for the anniversary after he accused me of cheating on him." "Cheating with his own uncle. I won't go for it." Maria said no. "So you're on your own, Maria. But you're an adult, Maria," like a snake whispered mother-in-law. "But if you won't be at the anniversary, everyone will think it's true. And if you come, so Robert won't blabber in anger, you'll prove to everyone that you've always been faithful to him. You're a good wife." Maria didn't understand why. But she agreed again. Lily's arguments were so obvious that she just gave up. "All right," Maria finally said. "I will come to the anniversary as Robert's wife, and that will be my last role. But I'm not going back to my husband's apartment." "Maria, my dear, thank you." Robert's mother was filled with gratitude. "I promise you that my son will not persecute you anymore. The main thing is that you will be present at his anniversary as his wife. And then you can file for divorce." Maria felt threatened again after talking to her mother-in-law. She called Eugene, who had left her his phone number today. "Maria, I wouldn't do that if I were you," he replied excitedly. "But on the other hand, maybe for people like them it will be the last chance. In any case, if you feel you are in trouble, or if you don't even have anyone to talk to, call. Anything I can do to help." Robert's anniversary was just days away. Maria had calmed down a bit by then. She was living in a rented apartment, and her confidence was slowly returning. The day before the anniversary, she received a phone call from Robert. "Hi, Maria." He greeted his wife in a gentle voice. "Are you ready? I cannot without you." Her husband laughed out loud. "I'll pick you up tomorrow." "Give me your address then. Robert will meet at the restaurant." Indifferently, the wife replied, "You don't have to meet me. I'll drive myself." "All right," agreed the man. "What time should I expect you?" "Let's make it 7:30." Robert could hardly control himself. He had so much on his plate lately that he could hardly cope with it all. His mill, you might say, was almost up. After Eugene found out about the arson, Robert took no more risks to his delight. Luckily for him, his uncle never filed a report on him. Money was running out very quickly, and he was struggling to make ends meet to give Vanessa anything. The last one was starting to weaken on him. It wasn't a big problem for Robert. The man wasn't stupid. He knew how to play with women like that, but the game had to be according to his rules. Naturally, he promised the girl golden mountains, like all her predecessor. But he always gave his mistresses a little money only for pocket money. "Vanessa, we are now engaged in a reorganization of our mill," he said. "Girls, so you'll have to be patient for about 6 months. And then we'll have very good earnings, and we'll buy you a car right away. Robert, there's no question about it. Vanessa, of course, I love you so much and I'll wait for you. But my favorite everything will be fine," answered the man and kissed her. "No, but it can't be." Robert used several tricks to get out of a relationship. One of them, the most common, was to accuse his beloved of cheating. The man usually presented some kind of irrefutable evidence. He'd also used this method on his wife. The mistress then tried for some time to prove her innocence. But Robert always remained adamant. "The only thing I can't forgive," he always told his new mistress, "was betrayal." His conscience never nodded him. That his own rule he was always breaking. It's all about others obeying the law he's laid down. That's why this trick worked very well. That's how he discovered most of his mistresses. For some are more vain and arrogant. He used the story of illness or situations where he was losing everything. Such women were especially not going to sacrifice their lives for a sick or penniless lover. They would immediately stop having any contact with him. "Beloved, I do not even know how to tell you, but I have found a very serious disease." With tears in his voice, he said, "And if I do not get a very expensive medicine, then in the coming months I will simply die. I ask you, for the sake of our love, to help me." Those were the last words Robert would say, and the girl would disappear from his life forever. There was another game he had, but it was a game the man played very rarely. Such girls on his way did not come across so often. Robert would just start stalking the girl. He kept blackmailing her that he would kill himself, that he couldn't live without her. It usually worked well with those who especially didn't want a family or a serious relationship. Such girls loved bodily pleasures and money, but they didn't want to take responsibility for them. Robert realized that Vanessa would be out of his life sooner or later. But the man had one very strict rule, which he never broke. All his mistresses were abandoned only by himself. None of them could leave him first. It was some kind of delusion or inferiority complex. But Robert never allowed a girl to leave first. Even if the initiator of the breakup was a mistress, he returned her by any means, and then he himself left. Many times the man asked himself the question why he married Maria. But he didn't know the answer. His wife was very devoted, and that was exactly what the man had always dreamed of. From the outside, it seemed completely schizophrenic. But Robert actually dreamed of such a woman who would be faithful to him always, while he would cheat on her. Robert's birthday came. Maria had been walking around with no mood since morning. It was Saturday, and she was idle. First here and there, not even wanting to look at her closet. Maria closed the chief, and actually would like to come there in a house robe, congratulate Robert and leave. But that's not going to work. I'd have to stay there for at least 3 hours. Maria tried to watch TV, but all her attention was absorbed by the upcoming holiday. She picked up the phone. "Oh, Lucy, I have a bad feeling," Maria complained to her friend. "If you only knew how much I don't want to go there." "Maria, but this is your last fight. It's always the hardest." Her friend backed her up. After this, you'll never see them again, and you'll have a new life. You think with doubt in your voice, she said. They've got me so brainwashed that I don't believe in anything anymore, Maria sighed. I never thought I would want this day to vanish so badly. You just have to set your mind to it. No matter what happens, you're ready to learn your lesson. Tune Maria Lucy out, no matter what they do. You're going to get through this, and there will finally be a white streak in your life. God never gives a trial unless a person is ready for it. And that means no matter what happens. You ready for this? Break a leg, as they say. You're going to give me a coven after this. Make sure you call me. Talking to Lucy had given the woman some confidence. She sat on the couch and thought about her words. Which means I'm actually willing to go through with this, she said loudly. No matter what happens, I will definitely make it through. Maria put on her weekend blue dress, let her hair down, and applied light makeup. She was beautiful. Maria didn't bother hiding her hair under a hat. She just threw her coat hood over her head. She didn't want to drag herself across town on public transportation and hailed a cab. But with God, she said to herself, and dictated to the cab driver the address of her destination. Her husband was waiting for her outside the restaurant. It was obvious that he was very worried. Robert immediately ran up to his wife and helped her out of the cab. Maria, we need to stick together today instead of saying hello, he said. Whatever it is, Robert, happy birthday, she said with a smile. May the gift for you be that I came here at all, and that's the best gift for me. Quickly her husband answered her. Well, let me take you under my arm. We should enter the restaurant together. Maria felt her husband's hand touching her. The woman was immediately knocked upside down. Abdullah was cold. Her whole body began to tremble. Maria, are you afraid? Robert looked at her in surprise. What are you doing? Everything will be fine. He patted her hand. Maria didn't answer anything. She did not fully understand what was happening to her. She really wanted to break free and run away. When the couple entered, Lily immediately ran up to them. She was playing the role of loving and caring mother-in-law. Maria, Robert, come on in. We'll be starting soon. She greeted the children. Maria looked around. The anniversary had indeed been planned in a big way. Half of the tables were already occupied. Judging by the way people were dressed, most of them were, by the standards of a provincial town, quite wealthy or middle class, so to speak. She tried to estimate in her mind, and she got 50 people. And where did she get so much money? The daughter-in-law thought to herself, as long as I've known her. She was always whining that she didn't even have enough money for a piece of bread. Lily was going to be 60 years old this year, but despite her age, she remained a woman, prominent. Eugene was nothing like her. Not that the man wasn't handsome. It's just that his sister was short, dark-haired, and good-looking. His brother, on the other hand, was a tall, skinny blonde with dark blue eyes. Lily paced back and forth, showing off her slender figure and a few gold rings on her fingers, which she deliberately adjusted every now and then. Probably gifts from her former lovers, a thought quickly ran through Maria's mind. Finally, by 7 o'clock, everyone had gathered and the anniversary began. The festive program was led by a special team. Every now and then they brought a microphone to someone and let the person speak. Dear Robert, one of the guests stood up. I don't even know what words I can use to express my gratitude to fate for the fact that one day you were met by the hired Lily. The actor sang dithyrambs to the birthday boy for half an hour. Finally, he recited by heart the entire text that Robert's mother had prepared for him, and wiping in sweat from his face the fatigue. Everything was going well. The people were having fun. Maria drank a little wine and, in her tension, torturing her neck all this time, let go a little. She ate. An hour and a half passed and Maria wanted to get up and leave. Suddenly, Lily took the microphone in her hands. Dear friends, she began. I thank you all from the bottom of my heart. I really do have a wonderful son. And the words that we heard today say that all the trials, all the hardships that I went through in my life were not in vain. I put so much effort into my boy, and everyone who knows him can call him a man with a capital letter. And as a mother, I'm very happy. But there is one circumstance that overshadows not only my son, but also me. Unfortunately, Maria, my daughter-in-law, could not appreciate what my son did for her. She played with my boy for almost 10 years. I'm sorry, but I can't take it anymore. Maybe by telling this story in public, she'll finally have the conscience to let our family go." Maria turned pale. She wanted to get up and walk away, but her legs stopped working. Not only can't Maria have children, Lily continued. She had dishonored her family at a young age by getting pregnant by a married man. Her father forced her to have an abortion when she was 15. And my favorite son has been hoping for a miracle all these years. If you only knew how much Robert loves children. But this sensual Maria cheated on my son all these years. And if you only knew with whom, with my own brother Eugene. Since Maria cannot have children, she did it absolutely fearlessly. But my brother finally realized her devious plan, and Maria dumped him. So now she's trying everything she can to keep Robert from leaving her. My sister-in-law is playing the good wife, and now I'm bringing it all to your attention. As a mother, I can no longer bear to see my son suffer. I ask you to condemn this woman. What's the use of such a daughter-in-law? Hired men have entered the fray. Send her away. Maria felt a lump of anger rise to her throat, and she wanted to shout at the top of her voice that none of this was true. But to her surprise, she calmly got up from the table and, without looking back, left the restaurant. "Eugene, are they crazy?" Maria sobbed into the phone. "How can you lie so brazenly?" "And this was to be expected," sighed the man. "Maria, wait for me, I'm coming to get you." He switched to the first name. Bastards. I was cursing to myself, Gianni. You think you're not under the law? That's all right. God will get you too. 40 minutes later, Eugene found Maria in the park by the old fountain. The woman's eyes were swollen with tears. But it's all over now. He hugged her. Now it's definitely over. He can't take you anymore. The man came to Maria in old work clothes, put her in the car, and they drove to the mill. "Maria, you take a walk here. We have an urgent order to finish today, and then we'll go somewhere else. You shouldn't be alone right now." Eugene and his men finished work at 10. The customers were paid very well that day, despite what his sister and nephew had arranged today. The man realized Robert was out of his mill and wouldn't last long. I wonder, and what will they do next? Pondered the man, the tractor, and the sacks. Would they have the conscience to ask for money? My birthday party ended exactly as Lily had planned. Everyone felt sorry for her and Robert, and the very last words were about tearing it down. "Thank you for such an amazing evening." Shaking the woman's hand was the head of Lily's TSA. "Do you need to hang on? I think after everyone found out about your daughter-in-law, she won't blackmail your son anymore, and he can finally divorce her." The man bent down to her ear and whispered softly, "I'll visit you one of these days. We'll discuss everything then." He winked at the woman. Despite such a dizzying success and euphoria, Lily and Robert did not last long. After 2 weeks, the man was forced to close his mill. He began to have serious problems with his mistress. "You know, Robert, you've been lying to me all this time." Vanessa declared to him, "I was at your work today. You closed the mill. So you don't have any money and you won't anytime soon." Vanessa, "Yeah, we moved." Robert tried to save the day. "We're in a different part of town now. Don't lie." The girl shouted angrily, "I was told you were bankrupt. Get your things and get out of my apartment." She yelled at the top of her voice, "Vanessa, darling." Robert tried. "Didn't you tell me you couldn't live without me? Only if you had enough money." Vanessa answered frankly, "And I don't need a beggar like you. That's it. From this day on, I'm dead to you." Robert came home in a rage. He threw his things all over the apartment in anger. "Mom's run of the mill and it's over." He called Lily. "Because of that black bastard, I've lost everything. How am I gonna live now?" "Robert, son, I'll think of something." "It's cold," Mother said. "Well, don't you panic. I've got a couple of sponsors in mind. So we'll organize something soon." But a month passed, then 2 months, then 6 months. And Lily and her son were still not getting along. "Mom, I already owe everyone." Robert was cursing. "I'll have to sell the apartment soon, when you do something about it." "Did you do anything about it?" His mother got mad at him. "You've been hanging on my neck all your life. See, I can't do anything either. That damn director, and you're so greedy? Not a penny to me. I'm trying my best to give the co-owner of the gas station a break. But he only gives me pocket money. Maybe you should ask Eugene for money. My son suggested it. You'll cry, he'll forgive you and give you money. I heard his mill's so big, he's making a lot of money. That's out of the question. I'm not going to ask that bastard for anything. It's beneath me to bribe him. But 3 months later, when she and her son were left afloat without any means of subsistence, Lily made a pained face and drove to her younger brother's house. But I'll show you now. She scolded to herself. My son is bankrupt because of you, so you'll pay him back every penny. The cab stopped outside the big house. Lily pressed the bell. Who is it? A familiar voice sounded and the woman shuddered. I'll be right there. About 5 minutes later, Maria came out into the street. She was holding her big belly with her hands. You're in shock. Her ex-mother-in-law looked at her. What are you doing here? I live here. Maria laughed. What brings you here? Do you want your husband? My wife for you. Favorite relatives are here, she joked. Lily was completely defeated, and she realized it. But an inner impulse compelled her to fight to the end. Eugene, she threw herself, with tears in her eyes, on her brother's neck. My beloved brother. But let's not make a scene. Eugene took her hands away. You must be in a bad way. If you overcame your pride and came to me, Eugene, I'm so sick, continued to play comedy. Sister, I don't have long left. For everything, I'm sorry. I'm just now starting to realize what I've done. Please, I'm sorry. I wish I hadn't died with such a heavy burden. God will forgive, shortly replied the brother. Goodbye, Lily. Now forever. Coldly, he said. Will you leave me in distress? Lily burst into tears. I'm in such hellish pain. I need expensive medicine. Yes. Eugene turned around and looked at his sister one last time. Let your son treat you. He closed the door and went into the house. After Lily embarrassed her sister-in-law at the birthday party, Maria somehow waited until the end of the workday, and she and Eugene went to his house. The time was already late. The cafes were closed. Maria, if you want, you can stay at my place after dinner. If not, I'll take you home and pay for a cab, the man offered. Eugene, thank you for everything. But I need some time to myself, Maria answered alone. I have to cry until all this pain and tears go away. You've done so much for me already. I understand you, sighed the man. Unfortunately, people like that have no brakes. They think they can say anything they want and nothing will happen to them. You know, I've watched this phenomenon so many times, and I've realized that they believe what they say. They simply have no other choice. If they don't believe all this nonsense, it means only one thing to them, that they are lying. And that is a claim to their perfection. They can't allow that. So they have to believe their own nonsense. It doesn't matter if they look crazy to others. You know, it's the first time I meet such people, or at least in such extreme degree. While drinking hot tea, Maria said, they seem to be normal people on the outside, and you expect them to act adequately. And when it doesn't happen, you can't figure out what's wrong. That's the hardest part for me. It turns out that not all people are good and kind. There are some who willfully want to destroy you, and for no reason at all. But what have I done to them? There's no reason for Robert or his mother to treat me like this, as I told you. Eugene looked at her. There's only one way to leave them alone, and not to get involved with them in any way. You need to learn to just ignore them. They are nothing. They're just nothing. But they're very sensitive about it. How can anyone not validate their importance? They're not important. They're no different from you or me. So always presenting them as nothing, let them make up whatever they want. With their sick imaginations, you can make up anything. You just know that they mean nothing to you. After that day, Eugene started calling Maria every day. They had common topics of conversation. In fact, it seemed to Maria that Eugene had just saved her. There was some truth in that. He showed her what she had not wanted to notice before. After a few months, Zhenya and Maria became good friends. They sometimes went to cafes and constantly discussed things at work. Maria was very easy with Zhenya. 2 more months passed, and she began to feel that her new acquaintance was not just a friend for her. Maria immediately panicked. You see, as Eugene once said, I'm 50 years old. And after Lena was gone, I never looked at any woman again. I wasn't really interested in anyone. I even thought I'd die a bachelor, but you changed everything. I need you. Eugene, trying to keep it together. Maria, you're my best friend. I'll be honest with you. I feel something more for you, but I'm afraid. Then we'll just have to wait. The man looked her in the eye, and that's something we both know how to do. But the waiting didn't last long. 2 weeks later, Maria told Eugene, and they signed right away. Their wedding was more like a friend's dinner that the lovers organized for their people at the mill. Not 2 months later, Maria realized she was pregnant. Eugene, it's just some kind of miracle. The woman couldn't believe the news. God, I've waited so many years for this. Well, it won't be the last. Her husband kissed her. I'm still going strong. So we'll plan for at least 2. But I'd like a 3rd. You let me at least this one, laughed the wife. You know, as I fear, everything will be fine. Beloved, hugged her husband. My darling, how happy am I? After his sister came to Eugene, it was as if the last thin thread had broken and no longer with Maria. Business was booming. The owner of the mill opened 2 new shops for the production of fodder. He had good people working for him, and he did not insult them with wages. The first child Maria gave birth to was a boy. After him immediately Weather and came in a girl. Then the couple had a 2-year break, and their twins, 2 mischievous hooligans, were born. Maria, you even outdid me. Laughing at your sister brother. You probably waited until you were almost 36 years old to set records. We're Estonian, and we gave birth to 3. And you and Eugene are just like pies to find them. I'm not surprised your twins won't be the last. That's good, his father said. Let at least a soccer team be born. After all, the main thing is that our Maria finally got her happiness.
Subscribe and click the bell. How good it is to be in a cozy wooden house with a burning fireplace in the freezing winter. When the light in the room is extinguished, the fire, impatiently bouncing on the birch logs, seems like a lighthouse fire, pointing the way to the ships of the stormy sea. When you put a few new fields under it, the stove begins to hum quite a bit, and through the closed furnace door you can hear the crackle of its unburned wood. I looked at the thermometer cheerfully opposite the wooden ones. The temperature in the chamber was steadily rising. The red column had already reached the 15 mark, but it wasn't going to stop, and this despite the fact that it was minus 34 outside. I built this hut 5 years ago. I chose the most remote corner of Belgorodskaya Pusha. I worked all summer alone and finally built what I had dreamed of for a long time. Some women, including my wife, can't understand why I have to go to such a remote place and sit here alone. But that's what it's all about, being alone and away from people. I first offered Adriana to visit my forest hotel, but she flatly refused. The mosquitoes, the cold, the loneliness. Even with me, she preferred the socializing, the girlfriends, the blah, 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 blahs, and the advertising-filled nightlife of the city. I didn't try to change that and philosophically accepted the solitude. My outdoor life is not for my wife. And that was the end of it. The hut stood on the bank of a small river. It was a kind of promontory, which is washed by dark waters on 3 sides. Despite the fact that there were 3 and a bunch of frosts, the river did not freeze completely. And even now in the midst of winter, before me came the sound of a chortle. George's more often on the stones of water. I twisted the wick of the kerosene lamp, and the house became brighter. I relaxed, catching with all my body the heat developing in the room, leaned against the wall, on which hung a blue pelt. No matter how hard Nikon tries to moss the cracks between the ravings, the house still blows through. So I had to hang a rug on the wall, or like me, a skin, right in the center of this improvised carpet on carefully drawn, so as not to spoil. Hanging on the hook was an old but working from a tabletop 16-gauge shotgun. To be honest, I'm not a hunter. I love the subculture, but I have never killed an animal for pleasure in my life. There have been times in my life when I have had to shoot an animal, but only for self-defense or for sustenance. All the horned skins, and even the wolf skull that hung on the walls in the cabin, I bought from hunters for entourage. I'm not for bones, and I'm a pacifist. And if necessary, I can shoot even a man. But satisfying my ego by killing animals is not my thing. Being an antique dealer, a lot of interesting things pass through my hands, but as a rule, I sell everything. But the stuff that involves hunting sticks to my hands. Not many people know that a lot of hunting culture items are sold at European auctions. I will not say that they are exorbitant prices, but the cost in money equivalent of some artifacts bites. Much of what is now hanging on the walls of my hut, I bought in Europe. Agree that the hunting culture there is many times higher than in our country. I once went hunting in the Berezniki district. A bunch of scowling men with automatic rifles arrived. The hunters drove several boars at them, which they shot as if from a machine gun, then booed the carcasses, discarding the hides. The final is predictable. General drunkenness, specific individuals of the female sex, and a terrible hangover. No romance, no duel with the wild beast, nothing. Killed, skinned, dismembered, got drunk, got lost and drove off. Littered the forest in the process. That's all hunting. Once at the flea market, one intelligent old man was selling an antique hunting rock from Latin, covered with greenish mortgage rock noodles, natural leather. And hanging on laces, I immediately made a stand. An antique, and more importantly, an infrequent item. The seller asked quite a manageable amount for me, and I did not haggle. Bought this hunting artifact. The rock is needed in hunting to set off the hounds of hounds or greyhounds. Its piercing melodic sound can be heard far away in the woods or field. I didn't have a dog, but I hummed the horn along with my rifle on my elk skins and hide. I threw on the community tunic I had brought here back in the fall, and I went out before going to bed to breathe the frosty air. It was quiet. The silver moon brightly illuminated the tops of the snow-covered trees, trailing a silvery path to my house. I took a deep breath of the icy cold air and coughed. Frost rubbed my throat. Silence. No animal or bird made a voice. Even the cheeky cod-40 lurked somewhere. In the afternoon, even in the coldest weather, the forest is full of life. Saps try to pick under the frozen bark. Bugs huddle together in flocks of nettles, and finches feast on birch seeds. Flocks of crows piercingly cut circles over the pines in search of prey. Small forest birds huddle together on bare branches, trying to hide from the cold and predators in the silence. I thought I could hear the tree branches cracking from the frost. I looked at the snow-covered fir trees and realized that winter had finally arrived. Soon the first real frost would come. I admired the sleeping, gloomy forest, but for some reason an uneasiness grew in me that could not be explained suddenly. I felt someone's unkind gaze on me. I even shuddered with apprehension. I looked around. No one was there. Was I imagining things? God forbid. A rogue bear shows up. I don't want it on my head. I'm used to trusting my senses, or should I say instinct. That animal, subconscious sense of impending danger, it's never failed me. Not in war, not in everyday life. So there's something or someone here. The bright light of the full moon seemed to play on my nerves in a shimmering silvery glow, and charcoal on the blackness. The roses that surrounded the hut seemed to faintly wave their branches like hands changing pose. When was I Morgan? Or averted his gaze from them for a moment and crept closer to the house. With some sinister intent known only to them, I began to dream that the trees around me were whispering among themselves, waiting for a signal, after which they would rush at me and do something terrible. Trying not to look scared, I went back into the house. I locked the front door with a heavy steel deadbolt. By the way, the door opened outward, and it was almost impossible to break it down. And at that moment, a chilling howl came from outside. It couldn't have belonged to any animal I knew. I'll be honest, I've seen a lot of things in my life. But now a chill ran down my spine and my hands trembled. I took the gun off the wall, put a cartridge in the chamber, and pointed it at the door. Then I took the sharply sharpened axe off the rack and leaned it against the wall beside me. Gingerly, I looked out the small window, but saw only a slice of moonlit snowy woods. My brain played a cruel trick on me, inevitably plunging me into a nightmare world. I would suddenly remember hunters missing without a trace in these parts, and it made me feel even worse. I remembered my grandfather telling me that forest roads become impassable and dangerous in such studio frosts. Only a lucky chance and prayer could save a lonely traveler from the wickedness rampant at this time of year. My hand instinctively stung. A silver talisman in the shape of a spear hung on my chest as well, keeping my fingers on the trigger. I was trying to see something in the small one, and the end of it was peering at the locked door and couldn't decide what to do next. The howling had not resumed, but someone was circling stubbornly around the hut. I could clearly hear the crunch of snow under its paws and the crack of branches breaking. Expectation of danger is much scarier than the danger itself, even if it is deadly, but the visible fear of the unknown. Realizing this, I began to calm down. There was even anger awakened in me. Hell no. Will you take me? I've gotten out of worse. You can't just take me. Suddenly, I wanted to see an unknown enemy. Without an enemy, there is no battle without a battle, no victory. And I ventured warily, listening to the sounds outside the hut. I slowly began to walk toward the door. Well, it was time to gain some certainty, even if it was deadly for me. Holding the rifle by the butt of the neck with my right hand, I pulled back the deadbolt and swung the door open with a kick of my foot. There was no one. Only the dark, silent wall of woods that densely surrounded the house and the bone-chilling cold. What was it? An obsession, an unconscious primitive fear of the forest, passed on in the genes through a generation. I went around the hut, but found no one but footprints. I'm not much of a tracker, but I've never seen such big bear-like tracks. They were buried deep in the snow, so they must have belonged to a beast of great size, at least bigger than a bear. What kind of beast was it? I didn't know. No one else had been out at night. But I could smell something cautiously walking around the hut and trying to peer into the small, and the end more like a hospital. I slept badly. I lay half lying down, clutching my rifle and axe to me. Then fell into slumber, then awake. Finally, morning came. I shook my head, trying to chase away the remnants of sleep. What was it? Could I have dreamed it all? I took off my taffet, threw on my tulu, and climbed out of the hut. I looked for my skis. They were where I'd left them, under the canopy, close to the wall. The frost had subsided by morning, but it still clung to my nose and bit my cheeks. The dazzling white winter sun shone in the sky. We had to get out of here and go home. But to do that, I had to walk about 10 kilometers to an abandoned trophy factory. There I left the car. There was no way to drive it to the hut. I went back to the house, filled the stove almost to the point of burning, and began to pack. I hid the rifle in a hiding place from daredevils. Who knows who visits my dwelling without me? I took with me a small, razor-sharp tourist hatchet, which I bought in sporting goods back in Soviet times. I closed the door, put on my skis, and set off. According to my calculations, I should reach that factory in 2 hours. We fastened skis on the frosty snow. We trampled deep tracks. I was rhythmically shuffling my feet, helping myself with poles. The terrain was mostly flat, although a few times I had to roll between small fir trees on low slides. At that moment, my brain woke up again and screamed for all it was worth, a sense of danger. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a movement. An indistinct shadow flashed among the tree trunks. Ahead of me, the forest was closing in on my road, a very convenient place for an attack. Some beast was cheering me silently through the scrap storms. I was almost running. The parade of my breath must have been bigger than steam engine smoke. There was no more strength left. At last I climbed a high hill. At its bottom, at its very foot, protruded out of the snow, the half-ruined buildings of a trophy factory abandoned before the war. I thought I could even see my car on the highway to the small railroad car depot. I was frantically thinking of what to do. Ahead was a gentle slope pulling the highway all the way to the factory. Here and there, the tops of small fir trees and coriac trees were sticking out of the snow. There was no way out. I pushed off with my poles from behind, slid down the slope, fixed my skis on the snowy virgin land, and tree trunks flashed around me. In my head pulse was only one thought, only not to fall. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw how something huge, parachute black with red undercoat, huge jumps carried Steenie course, turning from snags and sticking out of the snow to her. The plant was rapidly approaching. By inertia, I literally flew into the open rusty gate and braked a few meters away from the car, shaking my skis off my feet. I pressed the central lock button on the remote, yanked the handle, the front doors. The door was like glued, frozen shut. I yanked several times, almost ripping the handle out. No effect. The door wouldn't open. Behind me, I heard the stinking breath of the creature. I pulled out my axe and pressed my back against the car. A few meters away from me stood a huge, scary beast, black in underground hair, a muzzle, something reminiscent of a gorilla. Sharp fangs, huge paws with sharp claws sticking out of its mouth. The beast stood on its hind legs and looked at me curiously. I saw no aggression in its appearance, only interest. I pulled the handle again. The door creaked open a couple seconds later, and I was already inserting the key into the ignition. The engine started at once and charged smoothly, despite the frost. The beast, standing motionless, only tilted your head to the side. I balled my hand across the back seat and pulled a loaf of white bread out of the bag. I rolled down the window and tossed it to the beast. He stood up on 4 paws and leaned over the treat. He touched the gift with his paw a few times and carefully took the bread with his teeth. The loaf instantly disappeared into the toothy jaws. The beast sneezed quite dog-like, turned, and leisurely sank towards the forest. I arrived in the city at night. All the way I was shaking with excitement. It was only when the lights of the suburbs flashed that I was a little relieved. It is now I, remembering the events of those days, so chipper, but then almost went crazy with fear. Driving up the driveway, I did not drive the car to the front entrance, but put it not far from the gate. I had a large lot, so there was plenty of room. I picked up my bag and walked to one entrance, opened the door with my key and entered the hall. Complete silence. I turned on the lights and realized there was no one on the first floor. Strange. What did I want to see? It's almost 2 o'clock. My wife's long asleep. For a while, I stood and admired how the light played on the various films hanging on the walls, real oriental carpets and cold weapons, all that could be brought from my business trips, antique steel. As if lurking in a long barrier of carpets, hiding my deadly power for the time being, I put down my bag and went to the kitchen, poured myself a whiskey, and drank it almost in a volley. Suddenly I heard a noise. It sounded like someone even shrieked. Anxiety instantly entered my brain. I listened. It was coming from the second floor. I took the broad-bladed sword off the wall and started to climb up the stairs, trying not to knock my boots on the steps. There was the bedroom. I carefully pulled the doors open. Not a bright light burned, but I managed to make out 2 naked bodies entwined in loving ecstasy on our marital bed. My Adriana saddled and unfamiliar Poroshenko Kersey Woolly, male and head tilted up, and hoarse from the swell of passion, in a voice almost shouted before me clearly came the voice of my lover rhythmically on his forehead, reading my wife. "I am better than your loser." The male continued, "Yes, you are the best. I love you." I realized it was time to intervene. I coughed in 2. Finally, I was seeing my lover, uncovered, climbed out from under my wife, and stared at me absent-mindedly. "Who is it?" He turned to Adriana. There was disappointment mixed with curiosity in his question. "It's my husband." The wife took a risk and pulled the sheet up to her chin, and the husband almost cheerfully said the male, "Go for a walk. We're not done yet." He scratched his hairy chest and went at me, clearly intending to throw me out of the room. His insolence made my eyes darken, but I quickly pulled myself together. The thought flashed through my mind that he was an immortal. For some reason, it made me laugh. I threw forward my hand with a sword. The blade, with a whistle, cut the air on the face of the male. A bloody streak appeared. No, I struck flat. I'm not a killer. The hairy lover roared, threw himself at me. I saw it coming, and dodging his straight punch aimed at my face, I struck his hand holding the sword in the jaw. The male horde with teeth and face down fell to the floor. "Did you kill him?" shrieked Adriana. "It's Thomas. His boys will bury you." I didn't say anything. Dialing the police number on my cell phone. "Hello, what's your emergency?" I got an answer almost immediately. "A stranger broke into my house. Help. He's probably trying to kill me." I yelled into the phone, faking hysterics. Then I removed a weighty steel fireplace poker from its stand and gently placed it in his hand, lying knocked out by the striped guest. Adriana looked at me in silence. The hysteria seemed to end when the lovers' heads were loaded into the car. The familiar captain took me aside. "Is that what you mean?" "That's Thomas. He runs the market. A lawyer's coming tomorrow, and he'll probably be released. He's a vindictive bastard. Could be trouble." "Thank you, Sergeyevich. I understand everything. Forewarned is forearmed." I shook the captain's hand. When I returned to the bedroom, Adriana was lying motionless, covered with a sheet. I was silent. My senses were gone. Only an unbearable pain was burning in my chest. Finally, my wife sobbed, returning to her knees and shuddering with her whole body. "Adriana," I said the once favorite name with disgust. "I'm going to leave now. Make the transmission downstairs so that in the morning when I wake up you won't be here." She started to say something through her tears, but I didn't listen. I quickly left the bedroom. When I woke up, Adriana was still home. She was trying to explain something to me. She was apologizing, singing an old woman's song about lack of attention, about how I'd stopped seeing her as a woman. She even went so far as to say she cheated out of great love for me. She said she'd be faithful to me for the rest of her life, until her deathbed. She said something about being forced into it, but she only loves me. At the end of her monologue, Adriana knelt down and grabbed my legs, begging for forgiveness, but something inside me snapped. I silently listened to this nonsense and wanted only one thing: to get her out of here. When the cab arrived, Adriana stood by the car for a long time, apparently still hoping for something. Then she got into the car and left my life. The next day, an unfamiliar man came to me, a lawyer, young, brisk, young man, with a long nose and long hair in a bundle, making him look like a rat. He leisurely climbed out of a large black SUV and approached my gate. The intercom buzzed. "What do you want?" I asked him rudely, looking at the screen at the uninvited guest. "Mr. Smith." There was contempt in the lawyer's voice. "We need to talk." "I don't need to." "Get out." I waited curiously for his reaction. It was obvious that the lawyer had not expected such a reception. He was silent for a while, then pressed the intercom button again. "What now?" I said unhappily. "Mr. Smith." His voice became much more courteous. "I have business with you. Please let me in." I pressed a button and the gate opened. "Mr. Smith, Thomas wants to sue you for moral damages, but he's a kind man. He wants to talk to you first." The lawyer was watching my reaction carefully. "I have nothing to talk to your landlord about. He broke into my house and assaulted me. I'm the one who should be suing him." I grinned defiantly. "Thomas was invited by your wife. He was her guest. After all, it's her house too." The lawyer wouldn't give up. "I own the house. My wife's not even registered here, so it's trespassing." I looked the guy right in the eye. "I should have just shot your Thomas." "Thomas doesn't see it that way. He's a stubborn lawyer. He wants to meet with you to discuss compensation for his injuries. Tell your master I have nothing to discuss with him." Now get out. I resolutely got up from the chair. The lawyer left silently. But I knew this was just the beginning. My cell phone was ringing. It was a familiar number. I'm listening. I answered quickly. I have an order. Are you home now? The speaker immediately took the bull by the horns. Yes, come over. Opposite me sat a middle-aged man with a slight shine on his temples. I need antique Oriental silver. It doesn't matter what region, preferably from the 16th or 17th century. My interlocutor took a sip from his glass. Coins, jewelry, or dishes? I specified. Both. The man grinned, preferably from Afghanistan, or at the worst from Central Asia, India. It can be from India. The man put the glass on the table. But what do you take or not? What is the price of the question? I'm a little tense. The order is complicated in a troubled region. The customer named the amount. I was quite satisfied with it. In what time frame? I asked again. There is no specific term. As it is done, but don't take too long. I agree. But I have unfinished business here. I poured whiskey for myself and my guest. I need help. In a calm voice, asked the guest. I guess so. I took a swig of whiskey, and I started laying out my problem. That's a bitch, life. You barely manage to recover from one blow, and then immediately get another. It's like walking through a storm of evil with your eyes closed at night, and you're scared to open your eyes. Suddenly, you'll fall on a limb, and you'll be left without an eye. That's why you rely on your hands. You cover your face with one hand and put the other one forward so that you don't bump your forehead or nose on the trunk. Have you seen a child's merry-go-round? Everything goes in a circle. Horses, deer, goats. Everybody goes back to the beginning and back again. The next round and on and on. Animals. Carousel. It probably feels like they're moving forward, but they're actually running in a closed circle. That's life. All the events in it repeat themselves with enviable regularity. Someone said that life is a spiral. Everything in it develops in an ascending order. Alas, it is not. At least not for me. A few years ago, I fell in love with a girl who happened to come my way. Her name was Kathy. I said her name, and the sweetness from the volume spilled over my body. How many years has it been? I still can't get over it. I thought she had a crush on me, too. But I guess that was just me. I had to leave urgently. There was something I couldn't put off. I left her the keys and asked her to wait for me. She promised to wait as long as it took. She said beautiful words about love and fidelity. But when I came back, she was gone. In the drawer were the keys to the house and nothing else. No answer, no hello. She didn't even leave a note. I searched for her for almost a year, quit my job, picked up all my friends, used all my connections, but Kathy just vanished into thin air. I searched morgues and hospitals, asylums and prisons, but to no avail. No trace of her. Somehow, in a drunken delirium, I thought she'd come from outer space. There was no other explanation. It took me another year to come to my senses. I never thought it was possible to fall in love with a woman who wasn't remarkable. She didn't have model looks or any outstanding charisma. She was just a girl of many kinds. But it so happened that without her I had no life. But time passed. Gradually her image began to blur. Life in any case dictates its own rules. I slowly began to return to normal. There were orders again, and therefore money. And where there is money, sooner or later a woman starts. That's how Adriana appeared on my horizon, a young, beautiful party girl. She had me by the balls. We met at some party, dedicated. I do not remember what I did not particularly get after the ladies, poured myself, and gradually kicked. The day before I had returned from another business trip, and I had money to drink. I was looking for an excuse to get away quickly. It was unbearable to be among the party, office plankton and major of these girls with fake breasts and one twist in the head. But at some point, a young female character landed next to me, without entering into unnecessary polemics. She poured wine into my glass, not forgetting herself. "Why be sad?" she asked after we'd had our drinks. I shrugged. I didn't feel like talking. "So handsome and all alone." The girl wouldn't stop. "My name is Adriana, and you're the one who's been brought here." That's the first thing I thought of. I had absolutely no desire to spread my tail and start the mating dance. But the maiden did not miss the initiative. Seeing that her efforts in them me ineffective, she withdrew to the second line of defense and went on the counterattack. Stupid party. She started from afar, pouring me more wine. "It's strange to feel alone in a crowd. What's stopping you from leaving here?" I muttered languidly. "Call a cab and go." My cell phone was dead. Adriana looked hopefully into my eyes. "If you want, I can help you." Those were fateful words. Only I realized it much later. Another glass of wine. And now I'm sitting in a cab next to Adriana. No, she didn't come onto me. Didn't get in my pants. She was sitting next to me, just like a caring friend. Then it turned out she'd forgotten the money. I paid off the driver and went up to her so she could pay me back. It was all sewn up in white threads, like the debt couldn't be paid back later or forgiven at all. It was just that I was already drunk and had trouble perceiving reality. In the morning, I woke up in bed with Adriana. I had no rejection. But as long as it happened, so be it. If not Adriana, then some other friend. No difference at all. 2 months later, we got married. It wasn't a big wedding, but it was elaborate, with important guests and a few relatives. We lived in my house. All the property belonged to me. The store and the antique firm, too. We didn't have a prenuptial agreement, but it was impossible to get anything away from me, except for the car I'd given her. But that was a drop in the bucket. We had no children. Adriana took her time. I didn't insist, like I had a premonition. But my wife was head over heels in social life. Girlfriends, parties, going out. But no sign of infidelity. Always home on time. Phone B, he during our life together. No one has ever cut me in the eye behavior Adriana in public without me all rank and noble. And then there's the affair with the market director Thomas. Honestly, I didn't understand why I was younger than her lover. I didn't deny her anything. Sex almost every day, which is what she lacked. I didn't go into the moral and psychological details of married life. Women are a pain in the ass to understand. They say they don't understand themselves sometimes. But the fact of infidelity was, as they say, obvious. No doubt I was worried, but not as much as I was after Kathy disappeared. Resentment mixed with bewilderment, a slight ache in my heart and soul. No matter what anyone says, no husband is ready to calmly accept his wife's infidelity. It is not pleasant to suddenly learn that for several years lived with an empty person on whom he spent the warmth of his soul. They say that between love and hate is a very thin line. Perhaps it is so. I was more than surprised when I realized that the love I did feel was just a fading fire that quickly went out. In the days that followed, as a clown friend of mine used to say, it's not my circus and it's not my monkeys. Well, in the end, I liked the single life better. So with Sam's release, I filed for divorce. And while that was going on, I started getting ready for a trip down south. But no such luck. Adriana was determined to take half my business and my house. It's a well-known fact that lawyers can do anything for a lot of money. My ex-wife didn't have that kind of money, so her lover fit right in. It's hard to say what motivated him, but it certainly wasn't love. Most likely a desire to get back at me for the humiliation and broken face. 2 days later, my lawyer contacted me and informed me that they were filing a lawsuit for property division. I realized that legally they had no chance, so other methods of persuasion would be used. And I seemed to know what they were. A week later, Adriana's nimble attorney set up a meeting to resolve, as he put it, the contentious issues. As I expected, the lawyer was an old acquaintance of mine. Yes, the one who looked like a rat. I brought my firm's attorney to the meeting, not so much to help as a witness. Apparently, The meeting was designed to intimidate me into sharing my property and money with a poor, abandoned woman. I decided to play the fool to fully understand their devious plans. Adriana outdid herself. Black, austere clothes, a veil over her face. She was grieving hard for the family I'd destroyed. It was mostly her lawyer who spoke. He talked at length about Adriana's unhappy fate, about her misstep, and about forgiveness. Finally, he got to the point. Without a second's hesitation, he offered to amicably divide my firm and other property as compensation for my wife's better years with me. He made such a face that I had no doubt what would happen to me if I refused. I sat silent and occasionally blinking my eyes, playing the complete idiot. Even my lawyer shook his head doubtfully and tried to object to the rat, but he immediately shut his mouth and looked at me expectantly. I stood up, shaking off my sucker mask, and said only one word, no, as I was leaving the meeting room. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the rat dialing someone's number on his iPhone. In the evening, 2 big men and Adriana's lawyer came to see me. My security guard escorted them to my office. Of course, the presence of security in my house somewhat discouraged the lawyer. He didn't expect me to be so eager, but nevertheless, he got right down to business. For almost an hour he frightened me with all kinds of consequences of my refusal, but he didn't threaten me directly. I withstood his diarrhea of words and sent him away. From what I had heard, I realized I had to strike a preemptive strike and end this balaghanza. I looked at my wristwatch. 12:30 at night. The landlord's late. Quiet. His family's visiting from home, so we won't be disturbed. I rode in the chair. I wanted to smoke, but the smoke would give me away right away. I can't help it. I'll have to do without smoking for now. I heard a noise from the street. More V's are coming. Well, finally, the front door slammed and heavy footsteps were heard. The door opened and a carcass clad in a black coat came tumbling into the room. I saw Thomas's hand reach for the light switch. No need to turn on the light. My words sounded like the voice of an angel on Judgment Day. The fat man froze and slowly turned in my direction. "Who are you?" With difficulty, he squeezed the words out of himself. "A horse in a coat." I couldn't deny myself a joke. "Sit down. We'll talk." I pointed to the chair across from me. Thomas understood my gesture correctly and slowly lowered himself into the chair. Gradually, he began to come to his senses. For about 20 minutes, I listened to Kareem talk about what Kareem would subject me to for breaking into his house. He even tried to call security, but no one came to his shouting. Then he started talking. I will not recount the text of my monologue. It wasn't very long. The gist of it is that if he gets in my way again, I will cut him off. No, not what you think. Just his head. At those words, I turned on the floor lamp, and Thomas saw right in front of him on the coffee table, bleeding, the severed head of his dog, the head of his favorite marble dog, Hector, as fat as his owner. You should have seen the horror in the eyes of my wife's lover. He seemed to swallow his tongue in fear. The silent scene lasted about a minute. Then his cell phone rang. Thomas pulled out his cell phone with trembling hands. I quickly snatched it up and put it on speakerphone. Someone in a panic had informed Tolstoy, the market director, that the food warehouses were on fire. I looked at Thomas. I thought I was more than convincing. I could have blown up his car for the last time. But that was overkill. I got up and walked out, leaving my master to admire the head of his favorite dog. Walking down the dark corridor, I had to step several times over the bodies lying in picturesque poses, knocked out by the guards' stun guns. 2 dark figures separated from the wall. "Let's go." I spoke quietly. "How's that dog sleeping on its hind legs?" The man in black smirked. "Did you really think I really killed the dog?" "Of course not. I'm an animal lover. But you have to admit, a rubberhead can be pretty impressive too." The divorce went smoothly. I was alone in court, and the whole thing took a little while. In order for a business trip to be successful, you need to prepare, surf the internet, go to the library. Not everything you need for your work can be found online. Wikipedia is nothing but a big virtual dumping ground. where everyone dumps unverified junk. But I didn't want unreliable data and information. My life was at stake, so it was impossible to make a mistake. The frosty winter evening seemed endless. Putting aside Keller's Guide to Antique Oriental Silver, I pampered myself with a Cuban cigar stuffed into the corner of an old leather sofa, a dark lampshade. The floor lamp cast a sharply defined circle of light on the floor, while the rest of the room was hidden in semi-darkness behind the wide glass door leading to the front porch. The frost was crackling, and the fluffy snow in the flower beds shimmered silver, sweat still and full of moonlight. The loneliness did not depress me. I always found something to do, especially when I was preparing to dive into another expedition. And if truth be told, I didn't want to socialize. I was a stranger to my neighbors. I'd disappear for long periods of time, and then reappear. They didn't seem to realize it. I was working, and that was good. Less they know, more they sleep. I smelled smoke, put the chicken cigar in an antique Latin ashtray. I got up and went into the kitchen, poured 3 fingers of whiskey into a pre-prepared glass, threw in a few pieces of ice, and took a big gulp. And at that moment the intercom rang. It was already 11:30 p.m. on the ancient ship's clock. I wondered who it was at this late hour. I reluctantly approached the background on the screen. In the not bright lantern light, saw a woman standing near my gate. She was wearing a dark fur coat and some kind of shawl, tangled up to her eyes. She didn't look like anyone I knew. I wonder who that is. Who do you need a sip of whiskey? I asked into the intercom microphone. I need the owner, the woman said distinctly, leaning her gloveless hand against the brick fence. I had more questions, but I suddenly felt sorry to keep a stranger in the cold. So I opened the gate. Come in on the camera. I saw the woman, staggering, walked to the native porch. Is she drunk? The first thing I thought. The woman with difficulty climbed the steps and was already standing in front of the front door. Hello. I can come in, quietly mumbled the unexpected guest. Come into the hall. I let her in and closed the door behind her. No, I don't think she's drunk. The woman hesitantly walked into the brightly lit hallway and stopped, looking at me confused. I even shuddered inwardly. Large blue eyes looked at me, curious and slightly wary. Take off your coat and give me your handkerchief. The stranger took off the slightly snowy artificial fur coat, remaining in an incomprehensible color woolen dress, which lightened her well-composed small figure, unwrapped on a warm-down coat, handkerchief, and with her eyes began to look for hangers. I, finally coming to my senses, politely took the clothes from her hands to the guest and hung them carefully on the hangers. She dragged the boots off her feet and looked at me questioningly. I was speechless for a moment. Standing in front of me was a charming young girl. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why had she come? These questions swirled around in my head, but I could find no answer. I didn't know many girls in this city, especially such charming ones. I stood silently for a while, trying not to look the stranger in the face. The pause was clearly dragging on. Come in. I'll give you some hot tea. A gallant and hospitable host began to awaken in me. Sit down on the sofa. The girl went further into the hall. Looking around curiously, she stopped near the carpet with weapons, silently looking at the deadly steel and Orsa for a while. Then she looked at me, smiled, and finally took a seat on the couch tentatively in her dress. Leaving my guest in the hall, I made my way to the kitchen, collected the kettle, removed the boiling water in the stock pots, found some carcasses, and all this splendor neatly arranged on the coffee table. The girl carefully took the cup, took a polite sip, and looked at me. So, what can I do for you? I asked politely. Are you Smith, Yuri Pavlovich? Asked the stranger, carefully putting the cup with hot tea on a plate. That's right. With whom do I have the honor? I said in a social tone. I felt like I'd even let my tail wag in front of the stranger. My name is Betty. I shrugged. I have very important business with you. She raised her blue eyes to me. Do you remember Kathy? I choked with surprise. Kathy, My heart pounded traitorously so the girl wouldn't see my excitement. I got up and walked to the window. Man changes with time, but love doesn't die. It can lurk somewhere inside and wait for its time to make your heart beat faster again. But I've really changed. New thoughts, views, passions, sadness, and joy. Sometimes I feel sorry for the old me, but I can't go back. And there's no reason to. I lit a cigarette and opened the window. Outside the window still rained frost and glitter. The fluffy snow shimmered silver under the moonlight, and the hall was warm. The fireplace was burning in the corner. Occasionally there was a crackle and a fierce spark, but for some reason, a chill ran down my spine. "Excuse me, how old are you?" I asked the guest. A tactless question. "Does it matter?" Betty shrugged. "You didn't answer my question." She looked me carefully in the eye. I held her gaze. "Yes, I remember Kathy. She lived here for a while. And then she disappeared without leaving a note." I leaned back in my chair. Memories of Kathy hurt me. I'd been looking for her, but to no avail. That was it, really. I wasn't going to open my heart to a stranger, even one as charming as Betty. The girl was silent for a while, as if deciding whether or not to speak further. "You couldn't find her." It was evident that Betty was struggling to say the words. "Until I met you." Kathy was friends with a guy named Michael. They were getting married. They'd already bought the rings. But then she met you. Kathy lost her head. She fell in love with you after you left. She waited patiently. But then her aunt arrived, your housekeeper. I don't know what happened between them, but she kicked Kathy out. And she had to come home. Michael found out she'd come back, found her and beat her badly. At home, she was abused too, called the town whore. One day, Michael showed up at their house and asked her to marry him. Kathy had no choice, so she said yes. When she found out she was pregnant, she thought it was Michael's baby. For almost a year and a half, they lived more or less tolerably well. And then Michael started looking at the baby, trying to find a resemblance to himself. He got the idea that it wasn't his daughter. He took a DNA test and it all came out. That night, he beat Kathy again. He screamed that she was a bad woman, a cuckoo who slipped him a fattened child. Michael took all his wife's jewelry, even her wedding ring. He beat her almost every day, and she couldn't take it anymore. One day, when Michael was at work, Kathy took the baby and went to live with me in my second cousin's house. I was renting a room in a communal apartment. Michael didn't try to find her. A month later, he filed for divorce. Kathy didn't object. The three of us lived together for almost 2 months. Kathy didn't work, and we all lived on my salary. But we were desperately short of money. So Kathy decided to go to Moscow to earn money. She left the child with me and left. She couldn't take her daughter with her because she was going nowhere. Before she left, she told me about you and that the child was yours. I had some money. I bought her a ticket to Moscow. Then Kathy wrote that she got a job as a waitress in a cafe. That's where she met Sebastian. He was studying in Moscow and was taking his final exams this year. Sebastian started courting her. They know how to round a knave fool's head. Promised to marry. Offered to go to his parents in Latvia. No more letters from Kathy. Where is she now? And what about her? I don't know. But why didn't she find me? I almost screamed. Especially if it's my baby. She knew I was back when she ran away from Michael. She came to see you, but she was met by a young woman who called herself your wife. She kicked Kathy out and said if she shows up again, she'll have to deal with the police. Betty took a sip from her cup. When Kathy got married, she changed her last name. That's why you haven't found her. I was lost for a while. Where's the girl now? I asked when I came to my senses. She's with me. I left her at a friend's house so I wouldn't have to drag her out in the cold. Betty sighed heavily. I wouldn't have dared, but I was made redundant a month ago. Christina and I have nothing to live on. The girl covered her face with her palms and burst into tears. Frankly, I was shocked. I had no reason not to believe the guest. Everything she told me was logical. "What do you want me to do?" I asked Betty. "I want to ask you for some money. We'll go back home for the first time, and I won't bother you again." Betty spoke quickly, as if she was afraid I would throw her out. "I've been promised a job." She didn't finish. It was clear to me. It wasn't a job. "Are you hungry?" Unexpectedly, I asked. She looked at me in surprise. "Let's go to the kitchen to get something to eat, and then we'll go get Veronica." I hailed a cab, and we drove almost to the outskirts of town. At the old house, a friend of Betty's had rented a room under a pile of codswallop. We found a little girl. She cuddled up to Betty with her little arms around her neck. "I'm hungry." The baby cried softly. The girl stroked her head affectionately. I tried to take Christina in my arms, but she screamed with fear and clung even tighter to Betty. When we got home, I cooked dinner with Betty's help because I had no idea what a small child could eat. Then I took the guests to my bedroom and put them to bed. I got up early, made coffee, poured myself a big cup, and sat down in the kitchen. I had made my decision overnight and was now waiting for Betty to wake up. Did I believe her? Yes and no. At least I decided to take a DNA test, and then we'll see. I didn't call my mother. She had enough on her mind as it was. She lived with Katya, my niece, so I didn't bother her yet. Betty came into the kitchen, and I poured her coffee and slid her some water and toast. As soon as Christina woke up, we'd leave. She adjusted her dress. "Thank you." Tears came to her eyes again. "What's the matter? Why is that? Do women always cry for everything?" "I'll tell you what. How's your jaw going to work out?" "It's hard to predict. In any case, the baby needs to be fed and clothed. If you don't mind, I'd like to hire you as a housekeeper. You'll live here with the baby. The money I gave you, consider it an advance." I put a card in front of her. "This is for groceries and clothes. Buy whatever you need for your child. Do you have a cell phone?" Betty shook her head in the negative. I slid her the box with the new iPhone in it. "You'll figure it out on your own." She nodded quickly. "My cell phone and the driver's cell phone are already in there. If you need to go anywhere, call and they'll take you. As soon as Christina wakes up and eats breakfast, we'll go to the lab and take the DNA test. I'm leaving soon, and I want to know the results before I go." I said all that in one breath. "So, any objections or not?" Betty shook his head in the negative. 6 days later, the DNA test was ready. I was not the girl's father. Betty read the test results and looked up at me. "God, what are we going to do now?" She sounded doomed. "Don't think. We'll leave right away." "I'm so sorry. I didn't even think it could be like this. I was sure Christina was your daughter." She put the card on the table and went to the second floor to get Christina. "Wait," I slammed my palm on the capital. "What exactly has changed? I need a housekeeper anyway, especially since I'm going away, maybe for a long time. By the way, Lena's coming today. She'll be with you while I'm away. The baby will be enough for you, Betty." The girl looked at me in surprise. "So I can stay?" she said. "Of course you can. You work for me. Everything stays the way it was." I grinned. "Yes, everything repeats itself. A few years ago, I also said goodbye to the girl I loved and asked her to wait for me. The circle had closed. I was about to get into a cab when Betty asked to come with me to the airport. I didn't mind. As I checked in for my flight and headed to the pogrom control area, Betty suddenly kissed me on the cheek and whispered, "Come back soon." As I passed through border control, I turned around. 2 girls, big and small, were waving at me. I could see tears on Betty's face. After a 6-hour flight, the plane landed safely at the airport of one of the Central Asian republics. Barely had I gone through all the post-flight formalities and stepped into the welcoming hall, my gaze caught a familiar face from the dense crowd. Jack. I had no doubt that he would be the one to greet me. I raised my hand, signaling that I was seeing an old friend. "Hello, brother," dressed in a long robe of camel and wool and skullcap. He gave me a hug. Long time no see. Hello, Jack. I was genuinely happy to see you. Almost 5 years. Let's go to my car. Jack picked up my bag, and we went to the exit from the airport. We looped through the narrow streets of the ancient southern city. Our car finally pulled into a narrow gate and stopped in the shade of the heat. A young woman, fast server, taken, gave Orhan. Seeing us, covered her face and bowed. Jack said something to her in an unfamiliar language. She bowed once more and disappeared into the house. Did you get married? I looked at the woman and turned to my friend. Jack took off his robe and threw it carelessly next to the cushions. But I'm not an old man. I didn't go any further into that subject. We settled around a low table covered with a colored tablecloth. The young woman poured the tea in half and disappeared back into the house. Education, though. Then we ate for a long time, washing down the food with flavored tea. Jack asked about the health of my loved ones. He was saddened to learn of the circumstances of my younger brother's death. Did you get your revenge? He asked me. Yes, briefly. As a man should, I answered. My friend nodded contentedly. Dusk began to fall. The hot southern sun slowly crept over the horizon. The heat began to subside. Soon we heard the cry of my Odin calling to the evening Maghreb. It looked like there was a mosque nearby. While Jack performed the threefold prayer, I managed to drink 2 cups of flavored tea. When it became dark, a silent woman lit several lanterns, illuminating the place where we were seated. From the darkness, the loud rolling of the CKAD and the rustling of bat wings could be heard before us. There is a ruin of an ancient tower not far away. There are a lot of bats there. They hunt at night and sometimes fly in here, Jack said. As if reading my mind, we finally got down to business. I briefly told my friend the essence of the problem, without going into details. Why burden a good man with unnecessary information? Especially since I have to work moderately anyway. There's no point in going. Jack said, wishing with his lips, it's dangerous to go beyond the river. The teachers are running rampant there now. They hit the Americans well and will soon take control of the whole country. We need to go southeast to Sea Valley. You might find something there. But we can look here too. I nodded in agreement. Very few of their caravans passed through the country beyond the river, so it is unlikely to find anything of value there. But in the Samara Valley you can search. There may be coins and silverware, just what I need. I'll look here, maybe I'll find something. After a pause, Jack continued, you take my car, gear, weapons, and head southeast. You'll pick up your car papers and gun permit tomorrow. He shouted something into the darkness, and a light came on in the doorway. Let's go inside and get some rest. Jack nudged me with his hand toward the house. The silent woman led me into a small room with a bed and a small table. A copper basin and a pitcher of water stood on the table. She pointed to the bed and said something. I nodded in response, though I understood nothing. The woman said another short phrase and left. I stripped off my clothes, slept, ran cold water over my face, and laid down on the bed. It was still hot, and I did not cover myself with white sheets, covering my eyes. I lay there and remembered the events of the last time. Too many of them had come upon me. I was awakened by a slight rustle, and the gentle touch of someone's hand on my chest. I wanted to ask who was here, but a soft, lavender-scented hand gently clamped my mouth shut. A woman's light and smooth body came over me. The unfamiliar woman was kissing my breasts, stroking my lower abdomen. From the surprise, I lost my ability to resist, and everything happened. There was no disappointment. The warm southern night, soaked with love and oriental delights, did its work as the naked young woman slid into my arms with a quiet tone. Responding to my kisses in my soul, calm and peace was born for the first time in a while. As I fell asleep, gently cuddling the submissive woman's body, I remembered Jack's words. I'm not an old man. My conscience was at peace. I was awakened by the aroma of fresh emergency coffee. Jack sat squinting into the rising sun, holding a cup of hot drink in his hand. I quickly washed my face and joined my old friend. how restful. Taking a sip, Jack looked at me, Rahim. I haven't slept like that in a while. I tried to catch the subtext in my host's words, but it was as if he was reading my mind. It was Camille. She's a widow. Her husband died in the desert a year ago. It's a good thing they didn't have any children. She lives in my house now. Did she like you at first sight, as they say? Jack added something in his own language. I lowered my eyes. Well, after all, it was her choice. We drank another cup of coffee. Finally, Jack slid a large diamond bag toward me. On top covered a netted assault rifle with a magazine attached. Lying there was a Kalashnikov assault rifle. On the side, I fumbled for 2 fully infected horns. 3 is enough, Jack commented. You're not going to war. In the bag, there was still a knife with a long, wide blade from the old war times artillery binoculars, wrapped in a desert-colored sniper's cape. At the very bottom of the bag lurked a familiar 1911 Colt and a spare magazine with ammunition, ID, groceries, and everything else in the car. You'll figure it out later. Jack stood up. God bless you, Adriana. There was a shriek, and the door showed Camille in its opening. Not paying attention to Jack, she ran up to me and hugged me. As I left town, I was followed by a long scream. The car was rushing down a sun-cracked highway, cutting the red sands into almost 2 equal parts. The road was laid out along an old caravan route. Back in Soviet times, the thermometer on the dashboard read plus 47 degrees. The engine was running at a breakneck pace. The arrow of the temperature gauge was inexorably rejoicing at the 100 mark. I sat in the driver's seat, open warm robe, under which there was only one swimming trunks. It was the only way to escape the heat, and not for long. Periodically on the horizon flashed mountain peaks, and I did not realize whether they were really mountains or ghostly mirages. This wait died less and less often. Through the desert drove cars destroyed from the heat asphalt for metal, wind, and the remaining few gas stations spent on the sides of the road. And all because of the heat, which burned all living things, making the vast desert even bigger. Its sands stretched all the way to the Aral Sea. I remembered Jack telling me that in his childhood in these places gardens bloomed and water rivers flowed. Now all this is in the past. The only source of moisture is seasonal short rains, and even those had long ago lost their unequal battle. The sun was steadily rolling toward dusk, but it was still mercilessly burning the dry air. The desert wind pondered the tops of the sandy velvets, throwing hot sand on the road. The day was leaning towards evening, and I realized that I would have to spend the night in the car. The only thing I was glad about was that with the setting of the sun, the heat would subside, and I would be able to breathe a full breath. The sun was almost touching the horizon when I drove off the highway on more or less level ground, turned off the engine, tired for the day, and started to use things, spread the seat, and put the sleeping bag. Took out of the trunk a stove with gas. I didn't want to eat. I was only thirsty. I quickly lit Gorilka and put a kettle and poured some brew into it. In such heat, locals drink strong green tea, kok tea, as they call it. While the drink was being prepared, I took out of my bag an automatic rifle, took out a cartridge in a cartridge, put it on the safety, and put it on the seat. There was no habitation for many dozens of kilometers around. It was as if I was in space, but you have to be ready for any surprise. Soon I was sitting on the hood behind a glass camel and cat, and was enjoying drinking hot tea and quenching my thirst. Suddenly, the wind picked up. The sky began to nod, clouds not about a new arrow gleamed lightning, and after a while thunder rumbled right above my head. I could clearly see jets of rain appearing in the sky. I was even going to hide in the cabin. But the downpour did not fall on the common land. The rain did not reach the ground, and escaping in the air, thundered a few more times, and only one warm drop fell on my face, still reaching the ground. The wind threw a handful of sand in my face as if in mockery, like a good portion of fine shot. The clouds crept slowly northward and into the sky. First one star shone faintly the second. And then in 5 minutes I saw the sky covered with meaningless schemes, constellations. The moon's not bright sickle was interrogating everything in dull gray tones. I went to bed early. I opened the windows a little for ventilation. I couldn't sleep for a long time. All sorts of things came into my head, but gradually fatigue took its toll and I fell asleep. I woke up to a rustling noise. The car shook a few times. I opened my eyes sharply and looked out the window. It was darkness all around. What was it? Maybe a snake. But how big would it have to be to rock the car like that? Suddenly, a wave of black panic and unbridled fear swept over my brain. My body felt like a village. I took a deep, hysterical breath of air and arched my back. By an incredible effort of will, I forced myself to find the flashlight and turn it on. Its light trembled, fading into darkness, still the same dead emptiness. All around, I sat there wet with sweat, feeling my heart tearing out of my chest and my frequent breathing drowning out all sounds. I gradually came to myself. Panic-past thoughts stopped rushing around in my head like frenzied cockroaches. I wiped the sweat from my face with the sleeve of my robe and exhaled deeply. Maybe it was just a dream. I tried to calm myself, slipped my gaze, dedicated to the not bright color of the desert. I spotted something black, quickly dissolved into the darkness. I remembered about the automatic rifle and put it beside me. The caliber is small, but still. Besides, there's also a Colt .45 caliber pocket gun. Feeling the weapon in my hands, I almost completely recovered. I took a swig of whiskey for courage and kept quiet. Listened to the night. There was another rustle. Somewhere not far away, the sand hissed and scattered. But the car stood still, and I fell asleep again. They say that in the most deserted sandy areas of Central Asia there is a Volga and a good one. It is a meter-long earthworm, dark red in color. It only appears on the surface during the hottest months. The local population is mystically terrified of him. After all, he is supposedly able to kill at a distance, whether spitting out a deadly poison or striking the victim with an electric shock. The legend of it is so widespread and so uniform that one has to think. At its core, it really is some extremely rare endangered animal, probably a relic of ancient times, now surviving in the most desolate corners of Central Asia. Here in the Red Sands, according to Jack, George has also been seen for a long time. He once told me that the worm appears only in the heat of June and July. Later it burrows into the ground and sleeps. The locals were sure that the worm has not gone anywhere and periodically collects tribute with human lives. Expeditions were repeatedly sent to search for the Long George. In 1954, on the territory of Inner Mongolia, worked American scientists on 2 Land Rovers. They left the settlement and disappeared without a trace at the request of the U.S. government. Mongolian authorities organized a search for the missing, found in one of the hard-to-reach areas of the Gobi. Both vehicles appeared to be derelict. 6 corpses lay nearby, as they had been exposed to the sun for a long time. The exact cause of death of the expedition members could not be established. It is assumed that they were the victim of a Long George. In the 1970s, 2 Soviet expeditions visited here in the Red Sands, trying to discover the elusive worm. They failed to catch this beastie, but they collected numerous proofs of the reality of its existence. But the results of the expeditions were not published anywhere, and they were soon forgotten by everyone except the locals. Abruptly opening my eyes, I met dusk again. Apparently, it was still early, but the heat had already gone under the pressure of the night. I tried to recall the dream, but it had already slipped away from me, leaving me with a pinched feeling of unease. The farther I traveled through the desert, the worse the road became. According to my calculations, I should reach the place by evening. The Sea Valley was nestled between mountains that already showed on the horizon in the distance. My gaze picked out a white dot. I stopped the car and pulled out my binoculars into the haze that rose from the asphalt. It was hard to make out the car. There were no people in sight. I decided to drive closer. There was no way to go around anyway. There was sand everywhere, and my car might get stuck. The closer I got, the louder the alarm bells rang in my head. Something's not right here. Just in case, I moved my automatic rifle closer, having previously taken it off the safety. The white Toyota stood with its nose in a pile of sand. The perimeter filled the road. In the cab, dropping his head on the steering wheel motionless, sat a man. His left arm hung along his torso. What was to the right I couldn't see. A little to the left, almost in the middle of the highway, a woman in jeans and a tank top was lying on her stomach. She also showed no signs of life. It looked like she was trying to get away from someone. I just don't know why she jumped out of the car. Maybe she was fleeing from the driver. I didn't hurry to turn off the engine and get out of the car. My brain was working hard, analyzing the situation. How long have they been here? No one overtook me. So they had driven here earlier, at least for a day. In this heat, the cadaveric end comes more slowly, but you can still see that the corpses are stale, and these are like cucumbers, as if just out of the shower. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I saw the driver's arm hanging loosely along the body. There was a barely perceptible tremor. Doubt scattered like shrapnel from a grenade. Ambush. I knocked out the first speed while simultaneously lowering the right window. The car lurched forward in an arc, avoiding the woman lying there. One thought drilled into my brain, just so I wouldn't get stuck in the sand. With my right hand, I raised my automatic and fired a short burst, right at the driver of the Toyota. You could see the bullets fit into his body. He jerked a few times like a rag doll on a string and fell out of the cab. It looked like he was dead. For real now. A gun fell out of his right hand onto the sand, but I couldn't see the model on the left side of the road. There was a burst of gunfire. I could hear the bullets thudding against the side of my car. I stepped on the gas, and then the thing I was so afraid of happened. The car came to a stop, bogged down in a sandy recount. I opened the left door and, firing, rolled out onto the sand. A machine gun line whipped back. As fire burned my left forearm, I felt blood oozing down my arm. But the arm worked, so it was tangential. Did I get a fix on where the shot came from? I got the machine gun in the curves of my arm. I timed it just right when the enemy would try to finish me off, cut him off with a short burst. I didn't know how much ammo I had left. There was no way to get a spare magazine. There was still a woman left. In the silence, only the crunch of sand under heavy boots was heard. I leaned against the car, took the cooking machine, and began to wait. It's like a game here. Who's faster? Finally, I saw a shadow fall from behind the car. The sun was shining in their backs over the sand, and a head in a baseball cap appeared. My machine gun jerked, ejecting the last shell casing, and at my feet fell the body of the woman who had been lying on the road. I sat still for a few minutes, waiting for an attack, but all was quiet. I slowly crawled into the seat and turned the ignition key. The engine started instantly. Everything was normal. I carefully backed up, then took a slight right and pulled the car to a stop after driving through the sand. The wound was bandaged first. It hurt, but had to be tolerated. The wound wasn't dangerous, but I gave myself a shot of anesthetic just in case. I didn't touch the bodies. Couple of days and they'd be gone. There's a lot of dead people around here. I looked at the Toyota, but I couldn't find anything. 3 characters, all lying in the sand, no sign of life. Picked up the gun that had fallen out of the driver's hand, a Barrett 96 nice car. I stuffed the trophy with a full magazine behind my belly belt and walked to my car. Soon a bleak desert landscape stretched on both sides of the road. After 60 kilometers, some buildings appeared ahead. As I got closer, I realized that it was an old caravan shed, miraculously preserved. I drove leisurely under the archway and found myself in the courtyard, where in the center there was once a small fountain with water. I got out of the car and walked under the shade. One of the arches, there were no people in sight. If they were hiding from the burning of the driving sun inside. But the yard was well maintained, and in places the wall where it needed it, or had chipped away, someone had reapplied fresh clay, and that had dried quickly under the pressure of the fierce light. I looked around the buildings, but there were no people. Maybe no one lives here all the time. Maybe they come here once in a while. The question is, why? As an inn, these buildings themselves, and lived in one of the rooms. I found a few antique jugs, mostly Latin, but there were a couple of silver ones. I threw them in the car. We had to drive to get into the valley by daylight. Finally, the road bumped into the mountains. It meandered between the rocks until it popped out to George's more often than not a mountain stream. It was getting cooler. Instead of sheep, trees appeared along the road. I realized I had reached my goal. An hour later, I entered a small village. But there was electricity and, most importantly, a bazaar. That's where I was going tomorrow morning. I stayed in a small hotel with the proud name of hotel. The room had a shower and a toilet. What more could a companion ask for? I ate some leftover rations and went to bed. The road had washed me clean. The trip turned out to be more than successful. In addition to the order itself, I had purchased something for myself. A day later, I filled 2 more cans of gasoline in the car and headed back. I had to spend the night on the road again, but everything was calm. By the end of the second day, I was pulling into Jack's yard. He did not meet me empty-handed either. I gave him everything I'd brought. The delivery of the shipment was not my concern. It was handled by specially trained men. When I told Jack about my adventures, he faltered his tongue for a long time, expressing either approval or condemnation of my frivolity. Then we drank some chaka, and I went to bed. After spending the night in Camille's arms, I went to the airport in the morning, accompanied by a friend. I didn't say goodbye myself. As they say, long farewells are tears. I had with me a few coins and a couple of funny souvenirs that I found in an abandoned caravanserai. We hugged in silence. I could see the mute question in Jack's eyes, and I knew how much I liked her. But I am a vagabond, a wanderer in life, so it's better to be without a family for now. I shook the hand held out to me firmly. I thought for a moment and took off my talisman, given by my grandfather, and gave it to Jack. Give it to Mina as a souvenir. My hometown met me with cold wind and nasty spring rain. A sharp contrast to the places I flew from. No one greeted me because I hadn't informed anyone I was coming. I picked up my car in the underground parking lot and took my time dragging home. In the 2 weeks I'd been gone, the snow had almost melted, leaving a pile of black mud along the sides of the highway. Overnight freezing. And now the car almost slid on the ice, dispersing the water. The wipers rhythmically swept the raindrops, the light glass. I smoked, letting out the blue smoke through the open window. I felt dreary. Too many women had been around me lately. But for some reason, the memory of the last one resonated in my soul. Camille, yes, she was the one who had captured my heart. But alas, I'll never meet her again. Jack will probably marry her off to some respectable gentleman. I can only wish her happiness. An hour later, I was on the ring road, and a short time later, I was pulling up in front of my house. When I tried to open the front gate, the key didn't work. That's odd. I had recently changed the lock, and everything was perfect. I got out of the car and pressed the intercom button. I was tired on the road, and now I wanted to drink whiskey and sleep. "What do you want?" An unfamiliar male voice answered me. I was even a little taken aback. "I need to get into the house in some stupid way," I said. A minute later, the wicket was in the opening, stood some middle-aged man. "What do you want?" "The owners are still asleep. Get out of here." He tried to slam the wicket in my face, but my brain went into automatic mode, and I came to my senses when the guard flew aside, hitting his head on the brick fence. Yeah, you can't beat skill. I carefully stepped over the man's legs stretched across the path and headed for the front entrance. The glass door was unlocked. I made my way into the hallway and carefully set my bag down beside the couch. I wondered what the other owners were like. I hadn't rented or sold the house. Maybe Adriana and her monkeys had shown up again. I wasn't angry. I was just surprised. Went into the kitchen. Fridge is mine, but someone else's tea set is too bright. I don't like those. Opened the cupboard. The dishes were a mix of mine and someone else's, but only porcelain antique Latin, which looked so beautiful, was not behind the glass. I made coffee and went back to the hall. I should have waited for these owners to wake up. I must have dozed off, because I didn't hear the man enter the hall. "Who the hell are you?" A loud voice woke me up. Above me, an awning rolled in my eyes in surprise. A man in a green from class robe. Next to me stood an unfamiliar young woman and long fingers with blood-red nails frantically typing something on her iPhone. "Actually, I'm in my house," I said loudly. "Who are you?" "Who to?" "We bought this house and moved in 3 days ago. The owner and her child went to her husband up north and sold the house to us." The man was seething with righteous anger. "The owner is a young woman named Betty, and the girl's name is Christina, about 4 years old." I was beginning to realize what had happened. Betty had tears in her eyes at the airport. "Come back soon." And she tried to slip me a baby. That was a quick turnaround. It was so banal, it made me laugh. They say you shouldn't let strangers into your home. I imagine she got lost getting ready with the money. I, without getting into an argument, went into the study, pushed aside the painting hanging on the wall, opened the door of the secret safe, and took out the documents for the house. "Here, read. The house has one owner, and I'm not married. I'll give you 1 hour to get out of here. I'm getting tired of this, and put the dishes back where they belong. We bought this house. We're not going anywhere. You get out. If you have a problem with it, sue me." The guy was practically yelling, "Girl, call the police." Well, God knows, I did the best I could. I stood up and grabbed the man's nose with my right hand, didn't give him a second thought, threw him out the unlocked door into the street while splashing in the rain. Trying to get up, I walked over to my wife, shooed her away. Without ceremony, the woman nimbly jumped outside. She jumped up to her husband and tried to help him up. I didn't feel sorry for them. From the looks of it, the guys aren't poor somehow stomping around. While we were stomping around the house, a police car pulled up. Really, they got a pimply sergeant on me. The pimply sergeant even punched me in the stomach a couple times. Consolidating their success, the policemen cheerfully dragged me to the car. Shouting something joyfully into the radio station. At the station, I showed my house papers to some important official in civilian clothes. He read the papers for a long time, moving his lips funny, then sighed. "This is a matter for the court to decide. You had no right to throw the present owners out of the house and to engage in violence." I didn't comment on his words and asked to make the phone call I was legally obliged to make. I quickly dialed the number on the other end of the wire, listened attentively, and was disconnected about half an hour later. The door to the office opened with a bang, hitting the wall. The boss sitting across from me jumped in surprise. The body of a man in a Kremlin suit floated into the office. He looked around the room and said, "Joseph." "Joe, I'm Mr. Smith's attorney." The man wagged his chin in my direction. "On what grounds is my client detained?" He tried to forcibly remove him. The warden started babbling, but the lawyer wouldn't let him finish. "My client is the legal owner of the house. It's documented." The lawyer's voice completely filled the office. "Mr. Smith does not have to prove what is already obvious. You are required to release my client immediately." But he beat the victim. The warden tried to interject. "The victim here is Mr. Smith. The men who tried to take possession of his house must leave immediately. And may Mr. Smith pray to God that Mr. Smith does not sue them for the theft of his property." The lawyer waved some paper like a flag. "You're to send a squad immediately and clear the house of invaders." Yeah, specialist, I thought. He should be at the UN. As I left the station, accompanied by my lawyer and a police captain, I saw a familiar, pimply-faced sergeant standing by the car. "Just a minute, gentlemen, a little matter." I walked up to the sergeant and knocked him out with a straight punch to the jaw. As he fell, his head hit the side of the police car. His cap rolled off to the side. When I turned around, rubbing my bruised long arm, the lawyer and the captain were looking the other way. The music rolled in waves, almost knocking me off my feet. I sat at the bar and spit my third glass into myself. The bartender looked at me sympathetically. His eyes felt like they were screaming. I also nodded. Suddenly, the mirrored shelves reflected to the point of pain. A familiar face. I even sobered up. "Kathy, was it?" I turned around quickly. A lanky, foreign-looking man was standing next to her, hugging her by the waist. To be honest, I was a little confused. Kathy hadn't seen me, and I decided not to rush to her at once. Something told me I should wait. I turned to Bardeen. He nodded understandingly. He seemed to have seen my ruse. I slowly pulled up my whiskey, trying to follow the couple's maneuver with my eyes. As far as I could see, Kathy was dressed in an expensive outfit. Around her neck dangled a not-so-expensive gold necklace with pants. I'm an antique dealer, and I know what I'm looking at. Paying attention, apparently. My ex-lovers got it all together. Then why is her daughter Christina's baby not with her, but with Swindler and Betty? That's weird. If everything's fine, why doesn't Kathy take her? Or is it just not her baby? The con artist needed the girl to scam me, to make me feel sorry for her, so to speak. This is crazy. All these thoughts were heavy, collectively expressed in my alcohol-soaked head. I couldn't even decide whether to approach Kathy or not. What if she's with Betty? The music suddenly stopped, leaving my ears ringing. I looked at the glass display case of bottles. Kathy wasn't reflected there, which meant they were seated at a table. I cautiously turned around. Sure enough, there they were, sitting in the alcove near the table where Kathy and her boyfriend were sitting. The young woman leaned over and said something to her beau. He got up and walked toward the restrooms. I get it. It's now or never. "Hello, my love," I spoke softly, but Kathy heard me perfectly well. "You can sit down." Kathy stared at me for a while, stunned, then nodded nervously and looked around, searching for her companion with her eyes. "How are you? How are you doing?" In a calm voice, I asked. She obviously didn't know what to talk to me about. "How's your daughter doing? Have you picked her up from her friend yet?" Softly, I asked. "What daughter? I don't have any children. Go away. My husband will be right back." Kathy looked around confused again. "Who's Christina?" I started shopping. "Who's Christina?" "Leave me alone." Kathy blushed. "My beloved has not greeted me kindly. And this is the man I've been dreaming of all these years. Although, on the other hand, I probably made up my own fairy tale of unearthly love. Kathy doesn't owe me anything." Suddenly, I was disgusted. I was about to get up when suddenly someone grabbed me from behind by the collar, and I could see Kathy's pupils dilate with fear. I was thrown off the chair and fell, hitting my head on the floor. While I was trying to figure out what was going on, I got a solid kick in the right side of my leg, even though I was drunk. But my reflexes worked, and I managed to regroup. A serious man at Kathy's, only jealous and bad jealous, wanted to kick me again, but I managed to grab him and yank him toward me. The man collapsed to the floor, pulling down the tablecloth and dishes at the same time. Now there were two of us on the floor, not so lonely anymore, but it was time to do the honors. I got up as quickly as I could and staggered to the exit, passing the bar. In the glass window, I saw a jealous woodpecker rushing after me. To be honest, I was getting pretty tired of fighting with him. I let him get closer. Then I took a step to the right, and with a U-turn punched him in the eye, jealously collapsed on his back, obediently headbutting the steps of the small staircase leading to the locker room. At that moment, the music roared and his pitiful squeak was drowned in maddening decibels. But why did I keep getting beaten up? I was feeling so myself. It was a shame that I even brushed away the tear-stained cheeks. I stood in the bathroom and looked at myself sympathetically in the mirror. No one to even feel sorry for me. On the cab ride home, I sobered up a little, and that's not good. I went to the kitchen, took a bottle out of the cabinet, and fell on my favorite couch with relief. Suddenly, I realized I wasn't alone in the house. Raising my head, saw in the semi-darkness of the hall, calmly sitting in a chair, a not young man. Asked in my temples how he had gotten here. It was the first thing that came to my mind. This place is like a back alley. It's not good to drink alone. Suddenly, the unexpected guest spoke. He took out a Chechen telescope from his coat pocket, a plastic cup, and with a sharp movement of his hand, put it on alert. "I can bring a glass one," uncertainly muttered I. "No need." The man understood everything. I poured the whiskey, and we drank in silence. "What's good in it?" The guest frowned. "Worse than our moonshine." We were silent for a while, until the man got down to business. "You had a very productive trip to Central Asia." The client was very pleased. He lit a thin cigarette without asking permission. "But you will have to go back to those places again." I looked at the guest questioningly. "There is a little business very well paid." The man let out a thin line of smoke from his mouth. "Silver again?" I asked gradually, coming to my senses. "No, not silver. I know about your adventures in the Red Sands." The guest looked for an ashtray. "The one where you encountered the elusive worm. Your story impressed a very rich man to such an extent that he got the idea to get the trophy." I almost choked, but I haven't seen it. That's just a guess. I was surprised beyond belief. So figure out what it was, mystical or real. The guest is standing up. "The fee will be..." He said such a sum that my eyes went black. "When do I have to go?" The thirst for profit threw away all doubts. For that kind of money, I was ready to walk to Central Asia. "A man you know well will contact you. He will give you the necessary instructions, help you with equipment and necessary outfit." "When will he contact me?" "Take your time. All in good time." The guest began to button his coat. "Just a moment. I have a favor to ask of you." "I'm up to." "Yes, sir." The guest looked at me curiously. I told him about the recent events in my house and my assumptions about the people involved. The man listened to me and asked, "And what do you want?" "To take money from the crooks." "No, it's not my money. You can keep it as a fee." I looked my guest straight in the eye. "I'm interested in the child. Who is he, and where is he now? It's ungodly to give a girl hope and then give it back." "All right, I understand you." The guest didn't let me finish. "What to do with the crooks?" "At your discretion," I said. The man turned and disappeared behind the front door. As of recently, I have a vintage radio waves in my office, a Minsk 61, made back in the 1950s. I took the receiver away from my mom when she persistently started complaining about the glut of old junk. There's a beautiful lamp in Rhodian in working order. It had been bought by my grandfather, so it came to me as a sort of inheritance. It now stood on the vintage pedestals to the left of the table and delighted the eye with its perfect forms. Yes, people knew how to make good things in their time. Time flies fast. Already the radios of the 60s are becoming antiques. What's up with receivers, equipment from the 70s and 80s? Now, in the antique trend, I am very often approached by fans of tape recorders of the late 80s of the last century. Ask already, and seeing the equipment of the early 90s, VCRs, analog camcorders, tape recorders. Even 30 years ago, we used this equipment, believing that it could not be better. And now it's gone vintage. Turntables are probably next. Apparently, every generation sooner or later starts to feel nostalgic for a bygone time, and maybe even without realizing it, looking for things that can at least for a while bring them back to their past. To be honest, vintage radio equipment is not my profile. But more and more often, I started to think about opening a special department in my store dedicated to this topic. For some reason, it seems to me that this direction of antique business is very promising. I cozily settled in an armchair, pulled out of the bowels of the table, typing a bottle of Jamieson and Nakatala, a 2-finger glass of the amber beverage. What to do? There was no question. If there is a Rhodiona, one should listen to her. I looked out the window. It was snowing, which is not quite typical for April. Large snowflakes were beating against the window like frozen butterflies, trying to make their way to the hot cabinet. I felt cold, and I stood up and closed the window. A toggle switch clicked. The settings dial lit up cheerfully. I remembered how in my distant childhood, including Rhodiona, I had felt inexpressible excitement. One inscriptions on the school at the construction site were worth what? Tirana, Prague, Moscow, Ljubljana, Berlin. The names of unfamiliar cities sounded to me like a pass to an unknown world, and the announcers, broadcasting in unfamiliar languages, seemed to me good wizards, counting their spells. I pressed the DV key for about 30 years now. Almost no one broadcasts on the long and medium waves. Once the bands were bursting with the number of stations. Today they are silent with occasional crackles and sounds that are not dickish. Finally, the melody of a sentimental French Schlager of the 60s poured out of the speaker. It was a wonderful time for girls with natural breasts, rubber band stockings, short skirts, spyglasses barely covering, and panties. I even clutched at the nostalgic memories, clearly picturing a time I knew only from old magazines and movies. The French chanteuse was replaced by an upbeat Chuck Berry hit. Women are bloodthirsty cats, but it's boring without them. Chuck assured me. Yeah, boring as hell. I thought about it and decided to take a closer look at the things I'd brought back from my last trip. I took 2 packages out of the desk drawer and laid them out neatly in front of me. One of them contained an antique dagger with a handle covered in silver and worn from time. When I pulled it out of its sheath, the weapon fell into my hand as if it had flown in. It seemed as if it had been made especially for me. In the other surtout was a small figure of a cat-like beast made of unknown material. It was probably carved from stone and covered with bronze paint. Its muzzle with an open mouth looked very spectacular. In the eyes of the predator were skillfully inserted black amethysts, a very rare variety of this semi-precious stone. The finest carvings, hundreds of tiny touches, all of which made the sculpture of the beast almost lifelike. Half-bent, back paws, pinned ears curved like a spring spine. It seemed as if the predator was about to deliver a swift death blow to the head of the raptor. A blood-red ruby was inserted, which seemed to set off the beastly nature of the figure. I wish I knew how this masterpiece ended up in a dilapidated caravan shed. I set the figurine on the stone shelf and put the dagger in the table. Maybe someday I'll hang an antique handmade rug in my study and place an antique weapon on it. As I drifted off to sleep, it seemed to me that the beast on the mantelpiece was ravenously removing the treasure with its teeth. The next morning I received a text message with the address. I scribbled it into my notebook, knowing the message would be gone in a minute. I took a long smoke, settling my gaze into the wall. Well, nothing teaches me anything. My life is always getting in the wrong way and always ends, as usual, with black ingratitude and hatred. And I'm going to hang on to a burden that I'll have to carry for the rest of my life. And on the other hand, there's no other hand. What's that girl to me? Who is she to me? You can't save and warm everyone. So that's her fate, and there's nothing I can do about it. Besides, where am I supposed to put her? I live alone, and I don't have any babysitters. I'm relieved. I finally made the right decision. In my life, I've learned one thing very clearly. Most women, regardless of age, are monstrously ungrateful. My car was traveling down a dirt road, periodically dived into shallow puddles, breaking the wheels, thin ice. It had been freezing since the night before, but it was already clear that spring has won the tedious winter. In an hour, the sun would warm up, and the ice would melt, and the road would turn into impassable swamps. Soon a one-storied barrack, with the walls eared from time and rain, appeared from the turn. I pushed open the shaky doors and stepped into the dark hallway. It looked like the structure was uninhabited, but judging by the voices carrying all from one of the rooms, there were people here. I approached the lantern door, leading into one of the rooms, and without removing my gloves, I turned the knob. The odor of rot and cigarette smoke hit my nostrils. Across from the entrance, a table was piled with smoke, leftovers, and empty bottles. Dropped his head on his folded hands, sat half-undressed woman, 2 men homeless. They were arguing loudly about something. When I opened the door, all these picturesque characters stared at me in amazement. Even the woman with difficulty, but raised her head. "What do you want?" Coughing, one of the men in a dirty dress dressed on a naked body. "Where is the girl?" Trying not to breathe the unbearable stench, I asked loudly, "Was Christina here yesterday?" The uncle seemed to have a bad hangover. He pushed the woman. "Hey, what's up? Where's the girl? What do you need her for?" Missed the woman, looking at me, swollen with lice from drunken eyes. I ignored her question. On the iron bed against the opposite wall, did someone stir? One of the men nodded at the pile of filthy crap. Here she crawled out from under the rags. She didn't even have the strength to cry. Probably those bastards hadn't fed her lately. I gently lifted the girl up, and she, like a kitten, trustingly nuzzled her nose into my coat. "Leave it." The woman tried to get up, but her legs wouldn't hold her, and she fell back on the stool. "I'm taking the girl." I honestly didn't care who Christina was. "What do you mean?" "I'm taking her." The first man reacted. "We fed her, clothed her, raised her, for nothing." I threw some bills on the table. "That's enough." It was visible how all the members of the collective's eyes flashed greedily. Dressing the child in a coat, I went out to the car, put the girl in the back seat. Asked, "Do you remember me?" She nodded.